I'm going to call this meeting of the Salem City Council for Monday, July 22nd to order. If the recorder could please call a roll.
Councillor Kaiser. Present. Councillor Anderson, absent. Councillor Nanke.
Here.
Councillor Leung.
Here.
Councillor Osick.
Here.
Councillor Hoy.
Here.
Councillor Cook, absent. Councillor Lewis.
Here.
Mayor Bennett.
Here. And let's have our two guest counselors introduced. Jeff, we know you, but tell us who you are anyway.
So Jeff Schumacher, I'm the chair of the Scan Neighborhood Association.
You don't have to hold the button.
Yeah. Yeah, that turns it off.
Oh.
No, I just.
I don't want you to be able to turn it off.
This whole thing will be a learning experience for
No,
me. So.
Not very hard. Look at us.
So yeah, Jeff Schumacher, I'm the chair of the Scan Neighborhood Association.
Great.
And
Well, welcome, Jeff. And Evan.
I'm Evan White, Land Use Chair of the Sunny Slope Neighborhood Association.
You guys are welcome this evening. You can do anything but vote. Okay. I'd make a motion. That's right. Thank you, Councilor Nanke. Okay, would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any additions or deletions, Council? None. Okay, great. Okay, we're going to have council comments. I'm going to lead off on these. I want to invite up the Sprague Little League team. Come on up here, and we want to introduce you to the community via our worldwide television network.
We can bust that over.
Yeah, just right up here in front, and the coaches.
Here, I got the
All guys at the back. Or you can kneel.
Well, I am just really pleased that we had a chance this evening to introduce the Sprague All-Stars. They're headed for the Regional Little League Tournament in San Bernardino, California, August 2nd to 11th. The team was undefeated in their 4-game state tournament held in Bend last week, and they will be practicing every day until they board the plane on August 2nd. Which flight are you guys? I'm just... The tournament's bracket has a total of 6 teams working during a trip back to the Little League World Series in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. You can tune in to ESPN on Monday, August 5th at 7 p.m. when the team plays its first regional game. Okay, that's ESPN, 7 p.m. This team's been working together for years. They were the District 7 champions in 2017, 18, and 19. They competed at the state level in 2017 and 18 and finished third both years. This is the first team in the history of Sprague Little League to make it this far. So congratulations. I want to introduce you to the team and their coaches. Manager is Travis Price. Travis, congratulations, Travis. Coach Mark Moon. Great job, Coach. Coach Joe Hoda, again, congratulations. And Sprague Little League President Tony Strenke. Okay, and then here's the players that are going. They're here with us, I believe, this evening. Brady Strenke's number 21. Jacob Hoda's number 99. Avery Rooster Lorman is number 35. Carson Big Mac McNally, number 10. Andrew Moon. Henry Moon, number 13. Gavin Price, number 3. Sully Puckett is number 18. Aiden Sale is number 8. Spencer Scoot Shortus is number 22. Tommy Van Vishler is number 47. Cameron Van Kempen is number 27, and Riley Wilson is number 7. Well, congratulations, fellas. Thank you so much for representing the community. George, you want to say something?
I'd like to thank the mayor and city council for having us, recognizing these boys. They've worked really hard. They've been playing together for a long time, and we put in a lot of work in the off season that has allowed us the opportunity to not finish third this year. So we're really proud of these boys. It's a great accomplishment to them, and we would appreciate the community's support. And not to show up the mayor, but it's ESPN Plus, ESPN Plus on August 5th. We have to win a couple of games to get on the regular ESPN. So I think you can download that on your smartphone or your tablet. I think you get a 1-week subscription free, so you would be able to watch it for free, and then after we're through with the tournament, you can dump it if you're not a huge sports fan. So, but thank you, and thanks for the community support, and watch some good baseball the week of August 2nd through the 11th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, go practice.
Half the chamber.
Your Wilson,
Look at now.
Oh, you bet. Okay. A couple other, as long as we're on youth in Salem, I want to mention a couple of things. The Safe Corps organization, the Care Corps, is going to be holding a fundraiser July 25th at the Ike Box. It's bingo raffle night. If you want to kind of get ready for baseball, you can go play bingo down at the Ike Box. This is raising money. It's from 6 to 9 p.m. And it is an opportunity to raise funds for the Ike Box. They also have a car wash at the West Salem Les Schwab from 11 to 2 on the 27th. And on the 31st, they're doing a Papa Murphy's event at 4 of the Papa Murphy's. This is a really great program the city is very involved in through our youth person who works with youth organizations. So we're real proud of these young people. They were here at City Hall last week, and I told them I'd mention their fundraisers. So those are my announcements for the evening. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the opportunity last week to participate in a fire training exercise with the Salem Fire Department. And I have to tell you, that was an amazing experience. And I've always had great respect for the men and women of the Salem Fire Department, but it's at a whole new level now. The work that they do to keep us safe is really remarkable, and I really enjoyed my time out there at the training facility and encourage all my colleagues to do so if you ever get the chance. So thank you, Chief Niblock, and to all your staff.
Great. Thank you for participating in that. Anyone else? All righty, we will move along. You have anything? Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for the people in the audience and those who might be watching, there was an issue on tonight's agenda that has been postponed, the sidewalk conduct ordinance. So that is not on the agenda. It's not going to be added to tonight's agenda. That will be brought to council at a later time, and certainly when that specific date is set, we will publicize that information and share that with the community and those who are interested in the issue of conduct on the city sidewalk. So again, it's not on tonight's agenda.
Okay, great. Thank you. No proclamations, well, we did have a presentation. We're to public comment then. Okay, Brian Hines. Brian will be followed by Carrie Renfro. I think that's correct.
Yes, Brian Hines, 10371 Lake Drive, Southeast Salem. Salem's Human Rights Commission has rejected the plan of city officials to house a temporary library in a building owned by the Salem Alliance Church, which opposes LGBTQ rights, because members of the LGBTQ communities won't use the library unless an alternative location is chosen. I'm going to share the words of the church's lead pastor, Steve Fowler, and of 3 people who left comments on my petition supporting the Human Rights Commission, which has 281 supporters at last count. First, the pastor. And you will never find in the scriptures any positive pictures of a same-sex union. It just isn't there. And, quote, any kind of sexual activity outside of a marriage with a male and a female, this is something we should not be engaged in. And now the 3 commenters or supporters of the petition. If the Salem Alliance Church wants to be against same-sex marriage, then so be it. However, our tax dollars should not go to this church. The city would be funding their anti-LGBTQ views. No, no, no to this location being the temporary home of the Salem Library. Why should my tax dollars go to an organization who believes my marriage is wrong and immoral? My family will stop using the library if the city insists on housing the library on the property of this homophobic organization. The second statement. The discriminatory practices of Salem Alliance Church and harmful derogatory beliefs held by the pastor directly affect the lives of myself and my loved ones in negative ways. While I support the missions of Broadway on a broader spectrum, I do not want to support city money going towards the Salem Alliance Church. And third, there were many others, but these are the 3 that I appreciated the most. The city should not house any public and publicly funded operations and private holdings, especially ecclesiastical holdings, even temporarily. The particular church in question, while doing many things that do serve the community at large, is anti-LGBTQ in its practices. Housing the library in a building owned by a church that gives to the community with one hand, while actively preaching against the equality of specific members of that community, will make those members of the community hesitate to use library services for the duration of the situation. There are many large empty buildings in Salem. Surely one can be found for a reasonable price that doesn't belong to a discriminatory entity. And we know there are alternatives. The city staff have told us this at their last meeting last Friday. I talked with a commercial realtor who just almost laughed when I said, there's got to be other buildings in a city this size that have an empty space of 16,000 square feet. And he said, of course there are. The city, the Human Rights Commission wants an alternative location found, even if it costs more and even if it is less efficient, because it wants the library, the temporary library, accessible and acceptable to all members of the Salem community.
Thank you, Brian. Carrie? Yeah. Followed by Phil Carver.
Hi, my name is Carrie Ballou Renfro. I'm a former chairman of the Salem Human Rights Commission, and I was a commissioner for 9 years. I remember Mr. Councilor Nanke very well from those many years. Nice to see you. I'm against the library moving to temporary facilities owned by the Salem Alliance Church. And the reason is that the church violates the spirit of city code by refusing to hire LGBT people in its Broadway Commons coffee shop. The city should not be contracting with or paying money to an organization that does not follow the city's human rights code. It's plain and simple. It has been suggested that there are no other places for the library to move, but I offer a couple of suggestions. First, we're going to have an empty police station right down there. When the police move to their beautiful new location, the library can move down there. When the library is done getting its retrofit, the books can move back. Or, if that isn't going to work, there's a big empty Kmart building at the corner of 25th and Mission. Lots of parking. It's on a bus route. Shouldn't be a problem. I support the Human Rights Commission position. I, as a gay man, cannot go to this building. If the library moves there, I will have other options. And I would like to let everybody know that there are other options. We're not limited to the West Salem Library. CCRLS has a facility in Salem. The Chemeketa Community College Library is a CCRLS facility. lots of public parking, handicap accessible, uses your library card, no problem. So thanks for your time and attention.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you. Phil Carver?
Mayor, manager, and city council members. I'm Phil Carver, and I'm co-coordinator of the 350 Salem Group, which has many members in the city of Salem. I'm here to thank and congratulate the city for agreeing to purchase green electricity from the Portland General Electric Green Futures Impact Program. This is a program, as the energy professional, I can tell you this really is additional green electricity on PG's system. This program is very well designed, and it's very minimal impact to the city. It works out to 10 cents per citizen or per resident per year to bring the city up to 80% renewable electricity, which is pretty close to the goal for the state for 2040, I think. This is really a feather in the cap of the city of Salem. And when the city does when this is effectuated in 2021, mid 2021 or late 2021, the city should make a big hoopla about this and encourage its citizens to also participate in these good PG programs. And Salem Electric probably has similar programs, although Salem Electric is pretty much all renewable already. It's got a little bit of nuclear power and a little bit of purchases. But this is a good program, and I really thank and congratulate the city for signing up.
Thank you, Phil. Any questions? Great, thank you. I apologize, I just can't make out the first name, last name Schwartz?
My name is Tricarico. I'm at 1755 Berry Street Southeast. I'm a Salem
Could you
resident.
get closer to the mic?
Salem resident and a Salem Human Rights Commissioner, but we've already released our statement, so I'm not speaking in that capacity. I'm speaking as a resident, someone who works in Salem, someone who owns property in Salem. So the Salem Human Rights already released their expression of disapproval of using the space owned by the Salem Alliance Church. The church has preached against same-sex unions for years, and you can listen to their podcast, Condemning It as a Sin. If condemning same-sex unions was a universal Christian value, all Christians would be saying similar anti-gay things. They don't, because hatred of same-sex unions is not a Christian value. I will always support the freedom of religion, and I will always support freedom of speech. I will never censor someone for expressing their ideas if they are not harming anyone. But the ideas expressed by that church do harm people. The freedom of speech and religion does not protect you from the consequences of that speech. And one of those consequences for this church should be not getting $1 million of city funds. The church has tried to claim they have no issue with the LGBTQIA people, yet members of that community have left the church and cannot be employed at the church-owned coffee shop. The city cannot claim they are inclusive and supportive of the LGBTQIA community while funding a church that preaches hate against that community. Why does the city, the commission, and the library staff, and those in charge of diversity and inclusion for the city think that this is a good idea? How can they say that they care about the people that the library helps most when they're going to put it in a space that will be inaccessible to them? I understand that the library has a need to stay open for people who are at risk of homelessness or experiencing homelessness. I'd like to remind you that 40% of homeless youth are LGBTQIA youth who have been kicked out by their families. And where do they get those ideas that it is acceptable to disown your child for being themselves? From places like Salem Alliance Church. How can people go to this library and get the services they need, get the life-saving support that they need if it's housed in a place that hates them? I'd like to remind everyone that you have a chance to make an important decision about what the library does and doesn't support. I hope that they will make the right choice and find an alternative to the Salem Alliance Church property.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you. Rick?
I'm Rick Goppo, president of Marion Polk Food Share, 1299 21st Street. I am actually here on a very different subject, and it is to thank the City Council, the Mayor's Office, and the city staff for the completion of the food drive and in support of hungry families in our community. In addition to the funds provided by the city, the city employees themselves donated over $15,000 this year, which results in over 60,000 meals to hungry families in our community. And it really does take the whole community to make sure that no one is hungry. And because of your efforts, I can honestly say everyone has access to good, healthy food in our community. So I just came here to thank you.
Well, thank you. It's a great program you're running. It really is. Thank you. Okay, that's everyone I have signed up under public comment. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak? All righty. Consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move approval of the consent calendar with the following polls. Item 3.2A by Mayor Bennett, item 3.3A by Mayor Bennett, item 3.3B by Councilor Leung, item 3.3D by Mayor Bennett, and that's it.
Okay.
Second.
Second by Ossick. Any discussion? All those in, oh,
me to
sorry,
go
you
over
want
the
to tell what we just voted on, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that leaves item 3.1A, the draft city council minutes from our July 8th, 2019 meeting. And item 3.3C, an intergovernmental agreement with Chemeketa Community College for Emergency Services Program. Item 3.3E, increased authorized staffing for building and site permit review. Item 3.3F, transfer of water system infrastructure from Illahee Acreage Water Association to the City of Salem. Item 3.3G, an order for City Council review of Planning Commission May 2,019 decision approving consolidated application to change the comprehensive plan map designation and zoning of approximately 15.8 acre property located at 5871 Liberty Road South from developing residential with residential agriculture zoning to multifamily residential with RM multifamily residential zoning. Item 3.3H, compliance with Oregon pay equity law. And that concludes the consent calendar.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. 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 All opposed, motion passes. Okay. We will move on to public hearings. Open our first public hearing. Go ahead.
Question, I had a comment on the consent agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry, Phil. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay.
Well, I hope.
I'll be brief.
I thought you just goofed when I saw your name. I'm sorry.
I may have written it on the wrong sheet, I'm sorry.
You're on both sheets.
The 350 Salem wishes to support the 3.3D, the Resiliency Task Force, and wishes to make two comments about the process going forward, which we're confident will be a good process. One, we'd like the Resiliency Task Force itself to be open to self-nomination and to encourage the city to have a wide range of interests and different groups and ethnicities represented on the, and income levels on that, in the neighborhoods. It's always a challenge, I know, Mr. Mayor, to have a good, broad task force, and I'm confident you'll have one. And 350 Salem would be willing to participate on that if you would like us to. The second thing is the items that should be considered by the Resiliency Task Force. There are 4 adaptations to climate change that we would like to be considered by the task force and the city departments. And I'll do them in order of least priority. One is to deal with water shortages. The city already has a good curtailment plan. I just read it. But there's other public information and physical contingencies that can be planned for. I know you have a cooperative agreement with Kaiser to share water and the other contingencies that could be addressed. The second is maybe not so low in priority, but wildfires. Salem's not that abutted to forests, but there is a code that the city could adopt that's a wildfire code that cities are eligible to adopt, and I think the city should look at that code and see if it's applicable or maybe applicable in just some neighborhoods. The next is flooding, which the city probably has some good flood plans, but The Santiam control structure on Mill Creek, I think, needs to be scrutinized to make sure that it's operated and maintained safely, and all the other control structures on all the various Mill Creek and Shelton Ditch and so on, I think should be re-examined for things beyond the 96 flood. And then finally, the heat waves that are likely to come, I think those are the most likely to result in fatalities, and I think the city needs a really good contingency plan to address getting the elderly and the low-income people out of unair-conditioned buildings and into safe shelter, and maybe a neighbor help neighbor program, kind of like we do for cold weather, but I think hot weather is going to become more of a problem in the future. But thank you to the city for having a resiliency task force, and of course the Cascadia subduction earthquake is really big, the big one. But thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Phil, could you provide your written list to the recorder and to me?
A written list of?
You gave a list of things you'd like to see.
The four items?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'll send you a letter
Thank you.
or an email.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. I apologize for not catching that. Ready to vote? Did we vote?
No, we're on your public hearing.
Okay. Okay. Got a public hearing. Who's gonna
4.8.
Who's gonna lead us in on this?
The City Council will now conduct a public hearing for the purpose of reviewing the Planning Administrator's decision in case number SUB-ADJ19-02. The criteria applicable to this appeal are SRC 205.010D and 250.005D. Testimony must be directed toward the identified criteria or other criteria the person believes to apply to the decision. A failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue shall preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues related to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Testimony will be allowed as follows. The applicant limited to 10 minutes. The appellant, if applicable, limited to 10 minutes. Applicable neighborhood associations limited to 5 minutes. And other interested parties limited to 3 minutes.
Just one short announcement. There's two appellants, two folks who have appealed the lower decision. So because there's 10 minutes allowed for the appellant, each appellant will get 5 minutes each.
Okay, Olivia, go ahead.
Good evening. I'm Olivia Glantz, planner with the Community Development Department. I am presenting SUB ADJ 1902 for property located at 575 Salem Heights Avenue, also known as Wren Heights Subdivision. I'd like to enter the staff report with attachments and the presentation into the record. The applicant is requesting to divide 7.68 acres into 34 single-family lots with an adjustment to a minimum parcel depth of lot 23. Your staff report has a typo which lists lot 9 for the requested adjustment, and it is actually lot 23. The reduction is for 12% decrease to the standard. The subject property is located on the north side of Salem Heights Avenue between Liberty Street South and Holiday Drive. Salem Heights Avenue is a collector street as designated in the Salem Transportation Plan. The subject property and properties surrounding the property are zoned RS, single-family residential, as shown in yellow. There are previously subdivided lots to the north, the Hanson Addition, a condominium subdivision to the south, Villa Candelaria, and larger residential lots to the east and the west. The aerial photo shows the large subject property with a single-family dwelling, the condominiums located to the south, the existing single-family residentials in the surrounding area. The proposed subdivision layout connects all 3 existing substreets from the north, Felton, Earhart, and Downton Streets, and carries Downton Street to Salem Heights, meeting the city's connectivity standards. The entire subdivision will have sidewalks through, which will provide a link of pedestrian traffic from Salem Heights to Hanson Street along Downton Street. The Class 1 adjustment requested by the applicant for Lot 23, shown in red, is technically considered a double frontage lot. It has frontage along Earhart and along Downton Street. Along Earhart is 24 feet of frontage. As described in the planning administrator's decision, Lot 23 meets the decision criteria to reduce the 120-foot standard. The lot does not have access to Earhart Street, and due to the small frontage, would function similarly to other single-family lots with one frontage, which this lot would meet that standard. The adjustment is only due to the 24 feet of frontage along the rear property line. So here's a picture from Salem Heights looking from the east property line of the subject property looking north. And then looking east on Salem Heights, the subject property lies to the left of the photo. Looking south from the dead end of Felton Street. Looking south from the dead end of Earhart Street. And looking south from the dead end of Downton Street. A previous version of the subdivision brought to light several concerns about the existing trees near Salem Heights. As shown here, 22 trees along Salem Heights would need to be removed to meet the current city standards for a collector street. The sidewalk location is shown in red. Staff worked closely with the applicant to preserve as many trees as possible while allowing for the widening of Salem Heights and the installation of sidewalks. The applicant and planning staff compromised to save 17 trees by adding an additional 6 feet of right-of-way, which is not required by code. The additional right-of-way allows the sidewalk to be located north of the 17 trees. Conditions 7 through 9 of the planning administrator's decision are applied to those 17 trees currently located on the subject property, but that would be located within the right-of-way if the subdivision was platted. The condition requires that any request to remove those trees and for those trees proposed for removal in the current right-of-way go through the Public Works Street Tree Program, which requires its own public process. Both tree removal permits are not part of this application and are not part of the hearing tonight. The remaining condition is to ensure the health of the trees during grading and that the applicant can get the removal permit as needed. Staff recommends that City Council affirm the planning administrator's decision and approve the application.
Thank you. Okay, we'll begin with the applicant. Who's representing areas? Jeff?
Here I am, Mayor Bennett, members of the council. Good evening. Jeff Trost Consulting, Inc., here on behalf of the applicant, Tom Kay, who is with me this evening, as are Tom Kay's legal counsels, Mark Shipman and Alan Soren of the Southwood Griggs Law Firm. I'll be sharing my time with them as they have substantial information to present to you this evening. Also with us is Mark Ferris from PDG Engineering, the project engineer, and Mike Ard, a traffic engineer who has provided a traffic report. That's part of the legal summary that you'll hear from Mr. Shipman or Mr. Soren. So we concur with the staff report and decision and the conditions of approval that go along with that. We concur with the proposal to realign the sidewalk to preserve more trees along the street frontage, as was described briefly in Olivia's report. This proposal is for a single-family subdivision which is in the single-family zone. It's a permitted use. It's subject only to the subdivision development standards. It's a limited land use decision. The proposal itself is properly characterized as an urban infill development that will connect the existing neighborhoods to the north and the south, so this development will become a part of both. The area is mainly composed of one home per property, with the notable exception of the Villa Candelaria condominium development, which is directly south of this property across Salem Heights. It's a lovely development. It consists of 35 condominium units. That's actually more than what is proposed here, because in this development, while 34 lots are proposed, only 33 will be home sites, with one at the northeast corner being the site of a stormwater detention and treatment facility. So 33 homes on 34 lots. I'd like to point out that there's a large wooded property along the Salem Heights frontage just to the west of this, It's notable for many trees that are on this property. It is not a part of this development. So any trees that are viewed on that property just remain there because it's not a part of this. That property is also sometimes noted because there's quite a collection of used vehicles on the property that are visible from the street frontage, so it's identified by that way. This is not the only new development that's occurring in this area, as there are several new homes currently being built on infill lots in the vicinity of Granada Street and Hollywood Street to the northwest of this property. This proposal is also based on the existing infrastructure that is adjacent to the property. As you heard Olivia describe, there are 3 city streets that dead end at the north line of the property. There's Felton Street, Earhart Street, and Doughton Street, and appropriately enough, at the barricade at the end of Doughton Street, there is a city sign that notifies anybody who sees it that the street is intended to be extended onto the subject property in the future. But although there are 3 streets that dead end out the property with the intention that they will someday be extended to serve new development, only one of them will go through to Salem Heights, and that's Doughton Street. So you have 3 intersections at the north end, just 1 at the south end. There are also sewer and storm drain facilities that abut the property on the north end. In fact, the sewer line already comes into the property along its east line off of Felton Street. On the Doughton Street side, there's a city sidewalk that comes into the property for 20 or 25 feet. Whatever it's doing there, I don't know, but that's fine. It's part of the existing sidewalk that will be built when these streets are extended. This site is extremely well located with regards to commercial services over on Liberty Street. It's very close to Vista Market, Life Source, collection of restaurants, personal services, walking distance, if you like, very easy bicycling distance, good connections to Liberty and commercial via motor vehicle through Missouri Street or Hanson Street. It's also close to downtown, pretty easy bike ride from this location to downtown. So it's an inner city location that's been passed over for many years. While the property all around it has developed, it will contribute to the neighborhoods that exist in this area by connecting them, providing greater connectivity. It's served by Candelaria School, Salem Heights School. There are collector streets that serve it currently. Salem Heights is designated as a collector. I think you're going to hear a lot more about that in testimony to follow. And Crestview Street, just to the west, is also a collector, as is Hanson Street to the north. With that summary, I'll be happy to answer questions before I defer to Mr. Shipman.
Councilor Lewis?
Yeah, 2 quick questions. What is the typical or average amount of single-family homes per acre?
Well, I think we typically see densities from 5 to 7 units per acre.
Okay. Okay, that's it for me.
Thank you.
Any others? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Shipman?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Jeff, thanks very much. For the record, my name is Mark Shipman. I'm a land use attorney with Sawfield Griggs. My office address is 250 Church Street, Southeast Suite 200, Salem, Oregon 97301. My residence, however, is 3245 Sunridge Drive, South. We've lived at that property for almost 20 years, and it is 3 blocks to the west of this property and this proposal. And I've walked and driven by the subject property many times over the years. Here this evening on behalf of the applicant, the Thomas K. Company, for this combined application. The question is whether or not you should approve the subdivision adjustment application for the applicant. In summary, we believe you should, and you should affirm the staff decision in this case, as the application satisfy all the mandatory approval criteria. I wanted to draw your attention to a couple of items in the record with the remaining time that I have left. The first relates to a letter from Keith Wisenhunt from Project Delivery Group. Keith is a principal engineer with the company, and he wrote about the feasibility of the applicant to do a couple of things. One, to connect to the existing city infrastructure and whether those public systems are adequate for the proposed subdivision. And Keith has verified that it is feasible for the applicant to complete the necessary infrastructure in order to build out the subdivision, comply with the proposed conditions of approval, and he's also verified that the existing public systems in the South Candelaria area are adequate to serve the proposed subdivision. Second, we have a proposed traffic letter from Mike Ard, a traffic engineer, who took a more detailed look at the proposed traffic patterns of this proposed development to determine if the application warranted a traffic impact analysis, and it doesn't. Mr. Ard also looked at the dispersion pattern of the traffic, the vehicle traffic, and the overall safety of these roads. And finally, we also have a legal memorandum from our office, from Mr. Sorum, in response to Mr. Reitman's appeal letter, and we've responded to the elements in his appeal letter. And I want to make sure these items are entered in the record at this time. The scope of the review for this application is important this evening. These applications are not only limited land use applications pursuant to ORS 197-195, but they also deal with needed housing pursuant to ORS 197-307. And the review of this application and the conditions of approval placed on it are very different from a regular land use application, for example, like a site plan review application for commercial retail development. The review of this application and the lot adjustment applications is more of a technical review, because these two statutes and the Oregon appellate cases that interpret and apply them put up narrow, rigid sideboards for review and the decision and the conditions of approval. This is one of the reasons why our office wrote that extensive legal memo that should be in your packets. It's easy to forget that ORS 197, 195, and 197-307 established these narrow walls that may not allow us to go in a direction that you otherwise might like to go to on a regular land use application. Tonight, with the remaining time I have, I want to talk briefly about traffic and then about needed housing. Under traffic, there shouldn't be any confusion whether a TIA is required in this application. Staff's correct, and Mr. Ard is correct that a TIA is not required because the development does not meet the threshold for new trips added onto a local street or onto a collector, nor does the increased traffic contribute to any documented traffic problem as required by SRC 803-015B sub 1 and sub 2. Mr. Ard in his memo has identified that the daily trips will not all go out onto Salem Heights. Roughly 25% will go north towards Missouri Avenue, and the remaining 75% will go to Salem Heights, with 65% heading east down towards Liberty, and 10% heading west towards Sunridge Drive. Salem Heights is designated as a collector on the Salem Transportation System Plan, and while it may not look like a collector, it's a collector, and we can't change the designation as a part of this process. Our position is staff got it right. The incremental improvement to Salem Heights and the full improvement connections to Dalton, Felton, and Earhart as a part of this application will greatly help the traffic distribution in this area. So let's turn quickly to needed housing. This project qualifies as needed housing and is subject to the special provisions in ORS 197-307. The Oregon legislature made a determination that housing in our urban areas, like this property, can only have clear and objective standards applied to the application. In addition, those standards, any conditions of approval applied to the application, and procedures applied against the applications like these cannot have the effect, either singularly or collectively, of discouraging housing like this through unreasonable cost or delay. The needed housing analysis essentially balances the mandatory approval criteria against the application and then coming up with reasonable conditions of approval to be applied to a subdivision application like this one. In this case, we believe that staff did a thorough job in ensuring that the mandatory approval criteria have been satisfied, while at the same time balancing the fact that this is needed housing against the proposed conditions of approval. Finally, in conclusion, the combined applications do satisfy all the applicable approval criteria, and that's important for you to know. There is substantial evidence in the record to support these applications. The applicant has reduced a number of the lots from the prior application that had been submitted to the city. The applicant has modified his tree plan in order to save more trees along Salem Heights. The applicant has ensured that the average lot size of the proposed lots is larger than minimum lot size in the RS zone. This is a good request for a standard subdivision, and we respectfully request that you move staff recommendation and approve the subdivision and adjustment applications as conditioned. Thank you for your consideration, your time, and the development team's happy to answer any questions from the council if you have any.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Shipman.
Thank you.
We have two appellants, Mr. Ekus and Mr. Reitman. Either of you can go first. And if you would, if you're both going to speak, if you would each take 5 minutes, would that work okay? Great. What?
Good evening, Mayor Bennett, council members. My name is Nathan Reitman. I reside at 475 Salem Heights. My property is immediately adjacent to the subject property, and in fact, will, if this proposal goes forward,
Nathan,
have...
could you get just a little close?
And if this proposal goes forward, have 6 new houses within feet of my property line. It's naturally of large concern. And I submitted a detailed appeal to you. I hope that that's part of the record, and my purpose here isn't to restate it. I basically wanted to leave you with 2 takeaways regarding the information I provided. The first is that Salem Heights is a dangerous street today, and the proposed subdivision makes it more dangerous. Contrary to what the applicant has stated, I believe you're going to hear tonight neighbors who live in the area, firsthand experience, who will attest to you that this street is very dangerous. It's narrow, it doesn't have bike lanes, it doesn't have a sidewalk, and I honestly am terrified that someday I'm going to be driving home from work, tired, not paying attention, and hit somebody. And the reason is because there are people walking down the middle of the road. There's bicycles coming down the middle of the road. There's no appropriate place for people to be. And so the street's dangerous as it is today, but it's going to be more dangerous with the proposed subdivision. And that's true, even if the subdivision doesn't add one more vehicle to the street, which we all know it is in fact going to. And the reason the proposed subdivision makes it more dangerous is that even if there's not any more vehicles, you're going to have more pedestrians and more bicyclists. And it's the pedestrians and the bicyclists on the street with no place to be that are what make the street dangerous. And I would also add that danger isn't measured entirely by the number of accidents that have occurred. Danger is, it's basically a risk, a probability. And I think anyone who personally uses that street will attest that the street creates a substantial probability of an accident. So the street's dangerous, the subdivision makes it more dangerous. The second takeaway I would offer is that the city has the power to condition approval upon the developer making appropriate changes to Salem Heights that alleviate and mitigate the danger the subdivision causes. Maybe it isn't appropriate to require the developer to, and maybe nobody would want the developer to, improve the street himself to collector street standards. But it would not be unreasonable and it would not be inappropriate for the developer to add a sidewalk so that you take the pedestrians, you take the bicyclists, they have a place to be when they're leaving the development and walking down Salem Heights. So lots of people have lots to say today, but the 2 takeaway points are the street's dangerous and the development's going to make it more dangerous, and 2, the city has the power to condition approval of the application on conditions that will mitigate the additional risk that the subdivision creates. So I appreciate your time.
Great, thank you, Nathan. Are there any? Yes, Councilor White.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm confused by something you said, Mr. Reitman. You mentioned that we should require a sidewalk, but as I understand the proposal, there's a sidewalk going in, and in fact, it's on the inside of the trees as opposed to the more traditional outside of the trees. So I'm not following what you were saying.
Good question. Today, there's no sidewalk.
Right.
The current land use decision requires the developer to put a sidewalk right along the street, right outside his subdivision. Well, that is not going to help anybody get to anywhere. I mean, they can walk back and forth along the outside of the subdivision, but it's not going to increase the safety by allowing the people to navigate to any place they might want to walk on Salem Heights. So yes, it requires a sidewalk, but it's just right on the edge of the subdivision, which, in my opinion, does absolutely nothing.
Thank you.
Is there a suggestion, Nathan, for an alternative location for the sidewalk? Has that been discussed with the developer, or has that been part of the discussion going on?
In terms of the sidewalk along...
That you're talking about, yeah.
The sidewalk along the property, there's been all sorts of discussion about where that should be located and what it should be looked like. I'm not entirely certain where that has all landed. But to me, in terms of my concerns, what that sidewalk does, I mean, as long as it doesn't remove trees, it doesn't do anything to increase safety unless you're just worried about the people marching back and forth outside the subdivision.
Okay, great, thank you. Councilor Kaiser?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your testimony. I did want to clarify one point in that you said, quote, bicycles and pedestrians make the street dangerous. Can you clarify your statement?
Yes.
Because I'm a little confused.
Yes.
So you're saying that traffic is not a problem, it's the people walking and biking on Salem Heights that are the problem. Is that correct?
Traffic's a huge problem. And the subdivision is going to create more traffic, and that's going to be a problem. But the applicant keeps making the point, well, the amount of additional cars is not what the opponents think it is. And the point I was trying to make, and maybe I didn't make it well, is that anyone who drives Salem Heights know that the danger comes from the fact that you have people trying to walk down the street. If I were trying to walk down the street, you can't walk on the side of the road. You're walking in the road. And the road goes up, the road goes down, the sun happens to hit right as you're coming in. So it's when you try to walk and you try to bicycle on the street, that is the greatest risk in my mind of an accident.
So the danger is from pedestrians and bicyclists.
Well, I'm not saying that they are causing it. I'm just saying they have no place to be. Okay. I have no place to be when I'm walking with my kid holding their hand. I don't go out there because it's too dangerous.
Okay, thank you.
Any further? Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, if I could, just one follow-up on the sidewalk. It sounds to me like you think the city can require the applicant to put in sidewalks outside of the boundary of their subdivision.
I absolutely do, yes.
And if you could exercise that, where would you put the sidewalk from and to?
I would put it from at minimum, I would put it from the subdivision down Salem Heights to Liberty. And I think it would also be appropriate to have the sidewalk go from the subdivision up to Crestview Sunridge, where there are sidewalks. And I would note that the local streets in the area have sidewalks. The collector street that's supposed to be handling a high volume of traffic does not.
Yeah. Fully aware with it. Orchard Heights is an example of the exact same thing. I'm inquisitive about where you get the idea that the city could require that kind of taking.
Oh, absolutely. In the appeal I submitted, I think the city can and should require an urban growth preliminary declaration. As part of that, it could require the developer to have a sidewalk or make other improvements. I would also point out that if you look at the conditions of approval, one of the conditions is that the street system in and adjacent to the subdivision conform to the Salem Transportation Plan. I would submit that it does not. And so in order to have the applicant show that that criteria is satisfied, you could condition it on, okay, you're going to add a sidewalk. And there's other requirements like that, for requirements for safe, orderly, and efficient circulation. Here's one. Safe and convenient bicycle and pedestrian access from within the subdivision to adjacent residential and transit shops and to neighborhood activity centers within 1/2 mile. So that's one of the requirements of approval. I would submit that that requirement is not satisfied, but it could be satisfied if the developer were to provide pedestrian and bicycle, passage.
Any others? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Mr. Ekus. Ron, you requested that we keep the record open. I want to assure you we'll be doing that.
Okay, I'll leave that out of my testimony.
I thought you might want to.
And save some time. By the way, how much time do I have? 5?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I'll get right to the main issue of my appeal. My name's Ron Ekus. I live at 940 Salem Heights Avenue South, and I'm one of the appellants. And one of the main issue that I appealed on was the lack of consideration for criteria number 2 for requiring a traffic impact analysis. Because at the time, if you'll notice in the order, it completely dismisses criteria 2. There is no mention of a traffic impact analysis done. There's no opportunity, if there was one done, for anybody to review it. And staff or the order does not even address criteria number 2. Criteria number 2 relates to the current condition of a street. And as you'll hear and see and may already know, Salem Heights is narrow, it's hilly, restricted sight lines. It's a tree-lined street, so a lot of people like to walk there, but there's no curbs, there's no sidewalks, and there's no bicycle lane. And I believe it meets the criteria under 2 for being a street that has demonstrated traffic and safety problems for pedestrians and bicyclists. The code doesn't say that if one condition does not apply, the others do not. And what's happened here is that criteria 1 has been applied. And criteria 1 is unless it exceeds 1,000 additional vehicles for a collector street, then no TIA is required. No argument there as far as that condition goes. But failure to meet one criteria does not eliminate consideration of the other. Important distinction is criteria 1 is based on classification. Criteria 2 is based on the current condition of the street. And criteria 2 is applicable. The code doesn't say for all other streets, it doesn't say for streets not classified as collector streets. Eliminating 2 because conditions in 1 were not met doesn't make sense. Now think of it this way. To reach the conclusion that's in the order, you have to assert that a collector street can never, ever be unsafe because it's a collector street. And what collector streets are, and these criteria are based on theoretical future capacity and design, the design of which is often referred to as standards, but which are really guidelines. And yet we do have Salem Heights as an unimproved and unsafe street. And according to the transportation system plan, it may stay that way for another 20 to 25 years. So added traffic right now is important to Salem Heights. And the traffic could increase by as much as 20% given various traffic counts and different estimates. So without applying criteria 2, you're essentially telling the residents of Salem Heights that you could increase the traffic on Salem Heights by as many as 950 trips, increase by 50%, and still not require a traffic analysis. Now, I heard today that a traffic analysis has been done, but it's not part of the record in the case. It wasn't part of the order. Staff simply, and the order simply did not go and even address 2. And even in its response to the appeals, staff did not address criteria 2 and simply said, nothing's needed because of criteria 1. So I think on that grounds, this order is appealable farther on. But I do think there is another remedy, and it's one that the developer has already suggested as part of the record. In an April 29th letter to the hearings officer, the developer offered alternative 3, temporarily blocking the Downton-Salem Heights connection until the street is improved. This general concept has merit. It eliminates the need for the conduction of a traffic impact analysis immediately, provides time for neighborhood residents to develop a reference point of preferred alternatives for street improvements under an already established, recently established planning process for Salem Heights. Yes, it would deflect traffic, all the traffic to Hanson, but Hanson's a collector, and it's an improved collector, and it can easily handle that additional traffic. I don't think it violates, this alternative violates the connectivity policy. It only postpones a connection until the time is right in the future, and I recognize that that means the right-of-way obligations of the developer may need to be revised, as well as defining when the barricade could be removed. But I asked for additional record to be open so that perhaps further discussions can occur on that. In conclusion, you either should amend the order and remand it back.
Ron,
Sorry. That's okay.
I'm really intrigued by your alternative, and I'm not sure I caught it exactly, kind of what you're saying. Can you just really condense it down into what you're saying in terms of use of Hanson?
I'll read what the, if you don't mind, I'll read.
No, you go ahead.
What the, if you don't mean, I'll take time to find it.
Or you can
what the
just
developer wrote.
Is it in the record?
I don't have a notebook like my.
It's in the record, and it's a letter. Do you recall you mentioned
April 29th letter.
the 29th? Okay.
And it reads, It's several alternatives, one of which I think was the sidewalk, which has been altered. But it says another alternative would be to place a barricade at the entrance to Doughton Street, effectively eliminating additional traffic onto Salem Heights until such time as the city brings the street up to collector standards. This would require that vehicle traffic access the property from north on either Felton or Doughton, but would provide for safe bicycle and pedestrian circulation to the elementary school. At such time as Salem Heights Avenue is brought up to collector standards, the barricade would then be removed.
So the outcome is it turns Salem Heights into a more localized street? I mean, can you get through to Crestview? I mean, will there still be I want to kind of
I think what it does is it keeps the classification as a collector street.
Yeah.
But it gives the community time and the city time to make plans for what the street improvements should be and should be looked at. And at some point in time in the future, either when those improvements are either made or when the city or the city developer and the residents can agree, the barricade can be removed. But this is a situation where, as has been described, any additional traffic or the significant amount of additional traffic here increases the safety issues on Salem Heights.
Do you recall, Ron, the width, now the current existing width of Salem Heights? My understanding is
I believe it's
about
11 feet.
24 feet was my
I
understanding.
believe the lanes are 11 feet, but
Yeah.
traffic engineer.
Yeah, it'd be, I'm just thinking of the actual width of it, and then we've got a right-of-way that's a collector right-of-way.
Well, the right-of-way is, I believe, is in many cases 40 feet instead of the collector 60 feet.
Okay.
I would also point out that the collector standards for average daily traffic range from 1,600 up to 10,000.
Yeah.
So Salem Heights is kind of at the lower end, and we're kind of in this position where staff says, well, there's not that big an impact, but it also says that you're not going to get any improvements for a long time. What I'm encouraged about is that the city has begun working with the residents to develop a plan for Salem Heights so that at the first opportunities for adequate funding, we'll be there.
And I'm just curious about your opinion. I respect your opinion, but I want to, would this...
Yes, I do yours.
Thank you. But I'm really curious if you think collector designation is the correct designation for that after all these years and it's being undeveloped. Should it be reviewed in a different way?
I think it needs to be looked at. Okay. I think the problem we have here is that we're stuck with it for this particular case.
For this case.
I think it needs to be looked at. I have had discussions with Mr. Martin. There are some complications. I think it acts more like a local street. Certainly the local streets are more improved than the collector street. However, there are implications, I think, for funding. There are implications for other things as to what you can do. As an example, people often talk about why don't we put speed bumps in, which you can't do in a collector. You could do in a local, but according to the traffic engineer, because of the grade of the street, you can't put that in.
Not till we have flying cars, it'll be a...
Understandable. And I also think that one of the biggest problems we face is a concern that as a collector street, and because of those design templates that I've talked about, that are really design guidelines, not standards, there is a worry that this short street, and it's only it's less than 3/4 of a mile. This short street that's tree-lined and part of this natural character that people love, which is why they walk on it despite the traffic, that all of a sudden, because of those guidelines, instead of, what happens is that the street all of a sudden gets imposed on the neighborhood. And it becomes a street that's not appropriate for that length and that size. So that's why I think the working out preferred alternatives is important, and I think one of the alternatives to consider is whether or not it ought to be reclassified.
Okay, great. Thank you very
I'm
much.
sorry, it's a long answer, but chance to get a lot of things
in there. It's really
in there.
helpful to hear what kind of your thinking is on it. Anyone else have questions? Councilor Lewis?
Yeah, I just wanted, there, I'm looking at the layout of the subdivision there on the southwest area. There are 6 lots that would be serviced by what I would call a driveway. Would you say that that cannot, those
No.
6 lots?
I think the concern is the other, those are lots that essentially are on Salem Heights addresses.
But, so you are suggesting that, to put that blockage on Downton Street until,
I'm suggesting that we adopt what the developer suggested as an alternative. Yes. Temporarily. I do believe, after talking with the developer and also considering implications, that the developer is being made to put things in based upon certain right-of-way and guideline assumptions for a collector street. And it may be that some of that needs to be revisited, or it may be that there needs to be some opening that it be, because we don't know how long it will be before those improvements are made, that there needs to be some process perhaps established where the developer can petition to have it opened before that. And the community, there could be a discussion about that. I believe this is something that needs to be explored, and that it would be good to provide time to do that, or to remand it back to for a discussion of that.
so what it sounds to me like is, in the meantime, all, if not, most, if not all of the lots would move out of the subdivision on Downton Street or Fulton Street. Are either of those collector streets?
No, but they will connect to Hanson, which is a collector street that is improved. And I'm not sure these traffic counts, because some of them didn't have dates, but on the website that lists the traffic counts, where you can go to a particular location, the traffic count for Hanson that's listed there is maybe, well, there was one traffic count listed there for Salem Heights, was a little over 2,000. The one for Hanson at the school was 2,600, which it's not a really, it's not a huge difference. And I think because Hanson is a developed and improved collector street, and because the local streets, those streets that would connect to it already have sidewalks on at least one or both sides on most of it, that Hanson could readily absorb the additional traffic much more than Salem Heights in its current condition. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Ekus.
Thank you.
And now we have quite a number of folks signed up to comment. I would like to ask if there is a representative of the Neighborhood Association here to address council. No, okay. Well, we'll just start down the list then. Bill Fuji. Reminder, you have 3 minutes.
Well, thank you, Councilor Hoy and the rest of the City Council and staff. My name is Bill Fuji. I live at 3390 Holiday Drive. It's the last house on the pavement. I've lived there on and off since 1956. I also own the property on 6th Avenue South and Salem Heights. This is a wonderful neighborhood. And we so appreciate the staff working with the developer to preserve more of the trees and the character of the neighborhood. And I hope that that can be carried through in the considerations. The character of the neighborhood, you can see by the number of people that have come, makes it a passionate place to live. I grew up there, my kids grew up there, And it's just a wonderful place. And when we develop this property, it will also be a wonderful part of the neighborhood. Good growth is a vibrant part of our city. I would like to address a couple of concerns I have. You folks are going to be looking at some resiliency issues on the environmental impacts of our development. And so I really want you to think about your goal to have increased canopy for the trees. I very much applaud the preservation of these oaks, but the other trees in the development are at risk. The second thing I'd like you to consider, and Ron has a wonderful suggestion, but I don't know if you'll take that up or not. The intersection that's proposed, Dalton and Winola, is offset. Think about coming up to that stop sign at the same time, and what's the rule of the road? Because you're not looking at each other, you're outside of the normal way. The other thing about that is less than 100 yards away is a double yellow line at the crest of Salem Heights. If you folks do approve this subdivision, I would like you to consider adding a stop sign on Salem Heights. In the late 60s and early 70s, a certain fire engine red hot rod might have exceeded the speed limit along there once in a while, and I certainly understand those the concerns about traffic. So as a practical measure, a four-way stop there would be something to add regardless of the little wackiness of that offset street. My father would not be pleased at the thought that we're going to do that, but I understand if we realign the streets, there'll be some loss of some lots to be developed.
Thank you, Mr. Fuji.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dana, followed by Bill Dixon.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Dinah Upite. I live at 3389 Holiday Drive South. That's about 2 blocks from this site, and it's on the south side of Salem Heights Drive. I mainly want to express my concern about the safety of Salem Heights Road or Avenue now. I do actually walk on that street now and then. And most recently, I decided, well, I can walk down to Liberty. I'd had business on that street, and it would be good to take that walk. And I was surprised at how unsafe I felt, because there really is there's so little shoulder. It's very unsafe for a pedestrian. You're walking on pretty rough gravel. There's a slope into a kind of a ditch right along the pavement. And there are places where it just is very uncomfortable to walk. And I know if I twisted my foot and fell down, I would not be very happy about that. I would not want to fall into the streetway, into the paved way. Say if it's a collector street, it certainly doesn't meet collector street standards, and it is not currently a very safe street for pedestrians or bicyclists. And for cars who, they do have to stop behind a bicyclist every once in a while, but then you take the risk and you go around them, and you may be on a blind hill, and you can't really see what's coming ahead of you. Or if you're behind the post person, they're putting mail-in boxes and you're stopped. You want to go around them, but you can't see what's coming ahead of you. There is just no room on that street. There's no refuge on that street for bicyclists, pedestrians, or for the post truck. because, I mean, perhaps it should not be improved to collector street standards. That would probably remove a lot of the trees along the road. I think the proposal that Mr. Ekus put into the record, it would be worth considering, because that would actually give some incentive to deciding how to improve the street, Salem Heights Avenue, and perhaps some incentive to do it sooner rather than later. So I would urge you to consider the nature of Salem Heights Avenue in your decision on this case. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much, Bill Dixon. Carrie Bowersox will be next.
Mayor Bennett and members of the council, my name is Bill Dixon. My wife and I live at 608 Salem Heights Avenue South. Please watch the screen for a video that goes with my testimony. It's mostly video and just a little bit of testimony. The video shows Salem Heights Avenue from Sunridge Drive to Liberty Road. This stretch of Salem Heights serves a quiet, wooded neighborhood and forms the southern border of the proposed Wren Heights subdivision. The road is narrow. Travel lanes are barely the width of a school bus with mirrors. There are no sidewalks, bike lanes, curbs, or gutters.
Is that your shadow hanging out of a car?
That's my friend's shadow. He's braver than me. There's hardly any place to walk and no safe place to ride a bike. The dirt shoulder is rough and just 2 feet wide in places. The road is hilly. Sight lines near the hilltops are inadequate, both for those on the road and those pulling out onto it. Although the city has labeled Salem Heights as a collector street, it's definitely not. It's not even a local street. It's more of a country road. For all of its faults, though, Salem Heights is at the core of our community, and we love it. Please keep the safety and character of our neighborhood in mind as you make your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Councilor Lewis?
Yeah, I'm taken by the film. Thanks for doing that. It looks like you went by hundreds of homes on both sides of the street.
Yes.
And 34 or 33 more homes is going to make that much of a difference for you.
Our concern is that the street already is unsafe for the amount of traffic it's carrying for the reasons I outlined. The hilliness, the limited sight lines, the narrowness of the travel lanes, the lack of bike lanes and or sidewalks, the lack of curbs and gutters. The basic infrastructure for a street is very limited there. We believe the street is unsafe as it is now. Adding traffic to it certainly isn't going to make it more safe.
I thought I heard you say towards the end that you love the street.
We do.
So why not give 33 more families an opportunity to love it too?
Why not give us a safe street and 34 more families have an opportunity to use it?
Well, if the development standards were the way they are today, you'd have sidewalks. They weren't. People chose to buy homes there. People would choose to buy homes looking at the risk.
Thank you.
Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the video. What day and time was that taken?
It was taken in the afternoon because the sun is behind. I would assume my friend shot it. I believe it was shot on Thursday of last week, Thursday or Friday. And it was taken after work, so 5:36.
Okay, so rush hour time, Thursday or Friday?
I can't be sure.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Bill.
Sure, thank you.
Carrie, followed by Garth Jenke.
Thank you all. My name is Carrie Sosi Bowersox. I live at 3345 Crestview Drive, Salem, Oregon, 97302, about 30 yards from Salem Heights. I've lived there for 21 years. And I have walked my son up and down Salem Heights Street, and it is not safe at all. Mainly what I want to show my concern about is the danger of Salem Heights. I've walked on the road many times, and I've had to step all the way off into the verge and the side of the street into the bushes because the cars just go very fast. I will admit to going over 25 miles an hour on occasion on that street, as I think everybody who drives on that street does. And it is scary. It is not someplace you would ever want to walk unless you love the trees. To my second point, I would, if I could, direct your attention to that banner up there that says Tree City USA from the Arbor Day Foundation. We have a huge amount of Oregon white oaks that are slated for removal because of this development. These are heritage trees, and removing them really is in violation of the city's own codes and ordinances regarding tree retention. Oregon white oaks are both ecological and social legacy trees, and the size of these oaks, unless they've been cored and sampled for their age, we don't know how old they are, but their size suggests that several of them are in excess of 150 years old. That is a huge amount of carbon sequestration. And given the fact that our planet's climate is changing drastically, that needs to be of paramount importance. I would say that adding more traffic to Salem Heights does not overrule the need to keep these trees. Some such legacy trees are important habitat for species listed as sensitive and of concern in Oregon by Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, like the western gray squirrel, not to be confused with that rotten squirrel that eats all your plants, the eastern gray. We need these trees. We need the wildlife, although I could certainly do with a few less deer who eat my roses. It's very important to keep this. Climate change is not something we're going to be able to stop on our own, but keeping these trees and planting more of them, that's going to be a first step. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. I'm curious, as you said, you occasionally speed on Salem Heights. I'm curious as to why you exceed the speed limit. Is there a specific reason? Do you feel like the speed limit is too slow? Why do you choose to do that on occasion?
On occasion? On the very rare occasion?
I'm just curious since you brought it up specifically.
Yeah, it's curious. It's an easy road to go fast on.
Why is that?
It's dead straight, and there's nothing stopping you.
You feel like the speed limit should be increased on it?
I feel like the speed limit should be decreased, and I, quite frankly, if you want my honest opinion, Salem Heights should be closed.
Completely?
Yep.
So no access by vehicle?
Yep.
So the housing that's located off of Salem Heights would be inaccessible by vehicle?
I believe almost, well, not the whole thing of Salem Heights, but most of the houses can be accessed on the opposite way.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay. Garth Janke. Followed by Julie Curtis.
Yeah, I live on 985 Down Street. It's about a block north of Salem Heights. And a lot of good comments here. I actually had planned some things to say, but it's all been said very well, much better than I could. I'll add a couple things. I found on the internet a landowner's guide for restoring and managing Oregon white oak habitats. I brought that up because it was just brought up. Put out by the Bureau of Land Management, Oregon Department of Forestry, Oregon State University Extension Service, American Bird Conservancy and the Nature Conservancy, and the USDA Forest Service. And talks about how white oak habitats are kind of unique and rare and are somewhat special and perhaps significant. But I wasn't planning to go on about that. I really liked Mr. Ikas's suggestion. I hadn't thought of that. That's a great idea. That really, there isn't a need with all that development and those streets being made in that area to have it necessarily exit onto Salem Heights until Salem Heights is worked out. There's a planning process going on now, I understand, to figure out what to do with that street. And it seems to me whatever gets decided about what to do with that street will factor into what the developer might need to do. And so it shouldn't be done maybe until that process is complete. It wouldn't stop the development. I don't know, it sounded like a good idea to me. That's all I have to add. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Julie Curtis, followed by Janine, and I apologize, I can't read your last name. It's in shorthand. I just can't tell. Ah, okay.
Hi, for the record, my name is Julie Curtis, and I live at 3285 Holiday Drive South. I'm on probably one of the most problematic corners on Salem Heights. It's the northwest corner of Salem Heights and Holiday. And we have two blind hills on either side of our property. And where that stop sign is there is pretty darn dangerous. We're just the second owners of our home, which was built in 1955 and which we've lived in for more than 25 years. Though we live in a neighborhood that's mostly 1950s and 60s homes with big lots, for those of you that know that neighborhood, I personally and our family is not opposed to development. There's some infill going on in the neighborhood. We have big lots. We understand that that's important. However, development must be in character with the neighborhood and safely supported by our street infrastructure. That's not the case with the proposed Wren Heights subdivision. Wedging 34 homes into I thought it was 8-acre, but 7.68-acre parcel that abuts an unsafe, unimproved street, really on the north and south sides, is simply unacceptable. And I imagine many of you already know that. As repeatedly stated in the city's own report, Salem Heights is not up to collector standards. We've heard that all evening. And by a long shot. In fact, I was struck by how many times the city's own report said that over and over and over. It's not up to collector standards. And the city's solution was to work with the developer to develop sidewalks just along that property where the subdivision would meet Salem Heights. And I have to wonder why you would allow this many homes in an area that your own staff agrees will add up to 350 or more vehicle trips a day on this steep, narrow road with no sidewalks and blind hills. And again, they answered the question over and over in the report that, well, we're going to put sidewalks in at the site of the development, but that's not the stretch of Salem Heights that everybody else will be on. So I found it curious that the city believes that requiring those improvements only at the site of the development will alleviate the neighbors' concerns about increased traffic and safety issues. What it essentially does is it shifts the risk from speeding cars, I see them all day long, everybody speeds on Salem Heights, and increased traffic away from the subdivision and puts that risk on those of us who have lived in this neighborhood for many years, many of us over 20 years. And I'm especially concerned about the elementary school children who walk to and from Candelaria. In fact, I let them use our driveway because our driveway goes from Salem Heights through to Holiday. It's kind of a semicircle. The kids
Thank you,
cannot
Julie.
go to the corner.
Time's up. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mark Ferris, followed by Karen Ann Jackson. Mark Ferris. Oh, you're going to pass? Okay. Sorry. Karen Ann Jackson, followed by Ron Steiner. Oh, Janine, where are you? God, I'm sorry. Come on down. Why don't you just jump in front of Karen Ann and testify? Or would you rather pass? Come on. You are. I'll warn everybody, when I announce your name, you might want to get in line because this can happen to anyone.
Well, thank you for your time tonight. My name is Janine Stice, and I live at 3365 Sunridge Drive. And I just want to let you know things that haven't been mentioned. So I'm going to try not to duplicate what you've already heard. But for the record, Salem Heights collects cars that kind of go into Sunridge, which is kind of a T that then drops into Laurel, this other area down below. And none of those have sidewalks. And then on the other end, it's going to Liberty, which is not even as wide as, the newer collector areas. It does not have the official bike lanes and stuff to go into if you had bike lanes on Salem Heights. I've been living on the edge, running the neighborhood, really running in the neighborhood for about 18 years. And I would say of the 3-mile loop I do that goes from Sunridge through Holiday and Candelaria around to the cemetery, Mountain View, and back up, only about a mile of the 3 has sidewalks. So it was developed in a time when you were for the cars and not really for sidewalks. As much of the area is all the way down to Sunny Slope and like Browning, all of those neighborhoods. So Salem Heights isn't unusual in that it looks like a country road. You have multiple ones that honestly will look just this bad all the way down. And so I think it's important to look at what you're going to do with that going forward. So I really came tonight to support the idea from the developer on retaining a barricade of some sort on the Salem Heights exit. I'm not really sure why we have a developer that really has put that forward, and we have a neighborhood that's excited about that, why we're having so much pushback about it. I've heard it might be for emergency vehicle use, but I know in some barricades down when we go across the West Salem Bridge, the pedestrian bridge, you have barricades that you can remove if you need to have emergency access. So I think that's solvable. I believe that adopting this type of an idea is a way to promote active transportation citywide. It gives you an opportunity to look at a little bit and see what the car use is when you have only that exit, and it slows cars because they have to curve onto that Hanson, which has the sidewalks. In addition, we've already done this other places in the community, different ways of doing the streets. Where Ewald has not a completely developed street, but they have a shared bike and pedestrian path that's not a full sidewalk. In addition, I was over in Redmond, and their downtown city center has narrowed streets to cause slowing, as well as with signs that say shared bike auto paths. So I feel like that's a vision that could be going forward with the development of these roads that that have never been upgraded in the 60s to keep narrow roads that slow traffic without putting the traditional collector street standards on these developed areas. And I would the developer is for it because I think, we're asking him to kind of even wait on what he does in the front end of that until we figure out how that whole thing would look as a vision for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Karen Ann. Followed by Ron Steiner.
Thank you. Thank you for having all of us here tonight. And there are so many of our neighbors here tonight. This is like a neighborhood party. So thank you for being here. And maybe we'll all meet for ice cream afterwards. I don't know. For the record, yes, I am Karen Ann Jackson. and I live with my husband Ron at 596 Salem Heights Avenue South. Some years back, I had the privilege of serving on the Parks Board, and I was a chair of it for a couple of years. During those years, I also served on the Shady Tree Committee. So there's been so much that we've heard tonight that I am in jumping up joy about, but I'm here about trees, just about trees, and we've heard some really good comments about trees. Salem, yes, it was pointed out earlier, is a tree city. I believe we've had that designation for 21 years, if I'm not mistaken. So trees, as was mentioned earlier, reduce the carbon, they slow the warming trend, and of course they omit oxygen, and that makes us healthy. So are you hearing about the healthy trend that is really the catchphrase now? It's called forest bathing. And if you haven't heard of that, it's being outside, being in the fresh air, and especially being in the trees, and how healthy that is for our bodies and for our children's bodies. And so I'm here about preservation of as many of those beautiful white oaks and the heritage of them. I'm here about our healthy bodies and our healthy system, and I'm glad to hear that there's been some modifications already about the planning of preserving trees, and I just ask as much as can be that we preserve the trees in the Salem Heights area. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, Ron Steiner, Patricia Alley, and Steve Eichner, you'll go after Patricia.
Mr. Mayor and council members, since so many of the things were mentioned in my notes, I'm going to reduce them to about 40% of what I had prepared to do. I'd ask you a question. How many of you have walked Salem Heights Avenue South? No, on the council. We're talking about an abstract right now. The bottom part of my notes are, pedestrians and bicyclists, dog walkers are now at danger on this unsafe city street. There will be of great peril with more traffic. Among those daily pedestrians during the school year, many children walk to the bus stop. Some of those children are disabled, making their daily time along the street even more dangerous. I'm fully aware that the cost to the city would be great to make this a totally safe street, but the street is now tragically in danger. There's only one thing going to happen sooner or later. More traffic, another 345 daily trips does not make the situation any better. It would be a good time now to listen to some of the things that the neighbors are saying and some of the advice that the developer themselves have admitted to do. I ask the council to please reconsider your position on this and look at the safety of this for the citizens of Salem and the residents of this street. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. Any questions? Patricia Alley, followed by Steve Eichner.
Good evening. I appreciate the chance to address the mayor and my neighbors. I'm Patricia Alley. I live at 530 Salem Heights Avenue South, directly across from the proposed development. I grew up on Salem Heights Avenue, across the street from the proposed development. I lived there with my parents from 1951 to 1973. 6 years ago, I moved back to my parents' home, and I've lived there since that time. I think it's safe to say that along with Dr. Harvey and his siblings and a few other residents, I probably have one of the longer established relationships with Salem Heights. In regard to the proposed development, I share all the concerns of my neighbors regarding the safety, I should rather say the danger, of this suburban street, as well as an urgent regard for the historic trees and bucolic environment of this acreage. Salem Heights has always been a dangerous street, with speeding cars on a daily basis, many of them, few street signs, little or no traffic enforcement, poor lighting, narrow lanes, and no sidewalks or bike lanes. It's astonishing to me that, to my knowledge at least, no one has been killed on Salem Heights. I know that many animals have died because my parents and I have buried quite a few of them. The other issue is the landscape itself. The old cherry orchard is largely abandoned, but the white oaks, Douglas firs, lilacs, and blackberries are still there, some for over 100 years, perhaps 150. The deer come there too, and I do like the deer even though they eat my sweet peas. Nocturnal skunks and raccoons, opossums and birds, so rare in today's urbanized environments. For 22 years, I lived in Cambridge Meadows in southeast Salem, one of several rather large developments on small lots with no nearby green space. Our 19th century ancestors were wiser than we are. They created Bush's Pasture Park, Wilson Park, Inglewood Park, among others in the heart of downtown Salem. They planned for neighborhood parks that would give children and parents places to play, relax, lie in the grass, experience nature. If the Harvey Family Trust were to donate even a quarter of the present acreage, that would be only 2 acres, for the purpose of creating a neighborhood park adjacent to Salem Heights, they would preserve the oldest trees and at least some of the wildlife, and this configuration would, I believe, tend to reduce traffic and risks associated with this very narrow street. Parents and potential buyers would flock to buy houses in this development within walking distance of Candelaria Elementary School, which is still one of the top-rated public grade schools in Salem.
I'm sorry, time's up. Any questions? All righty. Thank you very much.
Okay. It's also a naming opportunity for the family and their legacy. Thank you.
Steve Eichner, followed by Bruce Kilber.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, and neighbors. My name is Steve Eichner. I live at 3464 6th Avenue South. My family has lived at this address for 4 years, though we don't live directly on Salem Heights. 6th Avenue is a cul-de-sac street, and Salem Heights is our only exit route. There are already safety concerns with existing traffic volume, such as single narrow lanes, poor sight lines, inadequate lighting, and heavy pedestrian and bicycle use. And there is further congestion from the daily stop and start vehicles of mail delivery, garbage pickup, and school bus stops. You might remember there was a single vehicle accident at the corner of 6th Avenue and Salem Heights that knocked over a power pole, leaving our street without power on Labor Day 2017. If you approve the construction of the 38 new homes, I should correct that to 33 residences, 34 lots, will mean chaos for our community. This project will also require wholesale removal of many mature trees, including a significant number of the protected white oaks. The trees contribute to a unique ambiance that attracted us to settle in this neighborhood. We walk our 2 large dogs on Salem Heights, and our 11-year-old grandson, who lives with us, is an avid bike rider. Effectively destroying this old-growth zone in the middle of the city would be an acute personal loss for us. I know that we speak for all the residents of 6th Avenue, many of whom are longtime residents with deep roots in the community. Our house was built in 1978, and we have neighbors around us who are original owners of their homes. Many are now elderly and cannot forcefully advocate for themselves, but I assure you, opposition to this development is unanimous. In conclusion, please preserve Salem Heights and move to deny the Wren Heights development project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? All right, thank you. Bruce, followed by Andy and Dean. Good, Andy. And Joyce Robertson will be after that. Go ahead then.
I'm Bruce Kilber. I'm resident at 715 Salem Heights Avenue South. My property is adjacent to the west side of the Lot 7. And affected by the proposed change of right-of-way of the property of address 639. First, there are 2, not 1 right-of-ways involved. Second, the proposed change would violate my property rights. I explain. My access road built by my father some 70 years ago does not adjoin the boundary line, but is set back and parallel from the boundary line by an open area of approximately 3 feet. For example, the southern section of the right-of-way open area contains the water lines for the 3 back houses of the right-of-way. Recognizing the existing access of 639, regarding the existing access of 639 and the proposed access, both are confined within the limits of my property. And for both cases, the applicant must penetrate my property before my road can be accessed. I emphasize, the applicant must first violate my property before he can connect to my road. Presently, the open area relevant to the proposed change is planted at the cost of my family. Thus, to attain access, the applicant must also violate that investment. As I understand property law, the city has no meaningful jurisdiction over the right-of-way of 639 until the applicant first attained my family's permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Great, thank you. Andy, followed by Joyce Robertson, followed by Jessica Yetter.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Alexandra Andine. I live at 695 Salem Heights. My property is on the lane along the west side of the proposed development. My comments are in response to the staff report dated July 15th. As noted in substantive finding number 5, public comments were received, categorized, and a staff response was provided for each category of comments. My comments here are in regard to bullet points A, B, C, and D. A, safety of Salem Heights Avenue. City staff acknowledged that Salem Heights is an under-improved collector street and does not meet city standards. Omitted from the staff report were comments submitted during the appropriate period describing the severity of safety concerns. Among these, a year and a half ago, a driver ran through 6 mailboxes, struck a telephone pole hard enough that the pole had to be replaced, went through a large hedge, and finally came to a stop in the condos directly across from this proposed development. This is not the first time some of these mailboxes have been replaced due to careless drivers. Children wait for multiple school buses along the street 192 days of the year. As the street runs east-west, there are many days when the rising sun partially blinds the view of drivers. And each time I pass students waiting for their buses, I am reminded of the student, I believe it was in Gresham, who a few years ago was waiting for his school bus on another street without sidewalks. The side view mirror of a pickup truck which never left the road struck and killed the child. The television news reports indicated that no one was at fault. It was simply a terribly unfortunate incident. B, traffic impact analysis. Staff acknowledges that Salem Heights does not meet standard, yet approves significant development plans. In fact, the appropriate course of action would be to either conduct a traffic impact analysis, a TIA, or allow development to proceed only after the street is brought to standard. To do otherwise is irresponsible. C, impact of increased traffic on adjacent streets. Since a TIA has not been done, it's not known if off-site mitigation is warranted, given that the lane adjacent to this property on the west is only a single lane, that's the same one that Bruce was talking about, and given that the proposed plans for the easement at the end of this lane are nonsensical when one stands next to the 12-foot drop between properties, I suspect mitigation would be required if a TIA were conducted. D, street system in and adjacent to subdivision is not compatible. In the staff report, the street connectivity that would result from the proposed development is described as beneficial. The report does not, however, include an analysis of the impact of that connectivity to the traffic loads on Salem Heights. Though it's been estimated that the development itself would bring an additional 345 trips per day, there's no analysis as to the increase from trips beyond the development as a result of increased connectivity. There are concerns beyond traffic and safety, though I've limited my comments to these in an effort to succinctly make my point that the impact of this development has not been given full consideration. Thank you for receiving additional comments on this matter, and if you'd like pictures regarding the lane that's been mentioned, I have them here.
Great. Would you like to give those to the recorder to be part of the record?
Tell me who the recorder is.
Oh, I'm sorry. No. Thank you. Oh, does anyone have any questions for Andy? Okay. Joyce Robertson, followed by Jessica Yetter. Oh, you're together?
Yeah. This is my daughter, Jessica.
Ah, well, hi. Go ahead.
So before I start, there's a couple things that I did want to bring up. My daughter came in, and we've had the house for just, oh, I'm sorry, I'm Joyce Robertson, and my daughter, Jessica Yetter. But as she came in, she was very excited to tell me about the deer that were in our driveway when she left for work this morning. We're not going to see those anymore if this development goes in. And then another thing, everybody's been talking about the traffic and what's it going to take. When I was in high school, one of my best friends was killed on a road that we had been trying for years and years and years to get a light. It took her death. 6 months later, we got the light. Is that what it's going to take here? So, to my talking points that I had originally put together. We bought this house 2 weeks ago. I moved in on July 8th, and the next day there was a sign literally next to my driveway. We are on Felton Street, the very last house before the development starts. We had no idea that this was going in. I honestly would not have bought the house had I known. Zero, absolutely not. I have health conditions. We bought the house so my daughter could care for me in my old age. I'm becoming more and more immobile. I can't sleep because of pain. Of course, opiates are not an option anymore with that whole crisis. So I deal with my pain, and when the pain subsides enough, I get some sleep. A large noise feels like a lightning bolt down my back. We're going to have what? 1 year? 3 years? 5 years? How long is it going to take to put this entire development in? My dream home that I put my entire life savings in is now my personal hell. So, I understand that we cannot stop the development from happening. That's a given. But I'm asking for our builders to be good neighbors, to not be driven by profit and greed, to not stack as many houses in as you can. Be good neighbors. Build a park. Make the streets courts so they don't have all the traffic. Please do not put Dalton Street through. Our pets are going to get killed. Our children are going to get killed. I'm asking you, please, I'm begging you to be good neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Jim?
Yeah, I want to make sure you live north of the proposed.
Right, north of the proposed, the very last house on Felton Street. Our neighbors, this is such a community. Our neighbors introduced themselves. I can tell you, Dave's been there for 49 years. Or I'm sorry, Chuck's been there for 49 years. Dave works in construction, and Jerry has 5 teenage girls. God bless him.
One of the ideas that we've heard tonight is to not have Dalton Street go through to Salem Heights, which would force the houses to use Felton, Earmark.
I would like to see where we have right now, you've got Earhart's going to be a court. I would like to see Felton go around that and be looped into Dalton. That would prevent all the through traffic. And then you could put Dalton from Salem Heights as a court. That way you're not going to have as much through traffic. And put in a park for the kids. Put somewhere where the wildlife can stay.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Thank you very much. Michael, Arl? I'm not sure. Arl? Are you Michael? Did you want to testify?
I believe that I will, as part of the rebuttal.
Okay. Thank you. Paul Norman? Paul something? Got a Paul? Paul must have left. I hope that says Paul. This is someone from Vista Avenue. Anybody from Vista Avenue? I just can't read the writing. I apologize. Yep. Comes with age. Okay. Jeff, you've testified. You'll do rebuttal, I assume. And Pete Vermeer. You? Don't want to? Okay. Great. That's it. Anybody else who didn't get covered? You want to testify?
Good evening, Mayor and councilors.
Pull up the mic, would you?
Last minute change in plans so I could get here. Been thinking about this. And,
Say your name.
Pardon?
Say your name.
Ellen Steele.
Ellen. Okay.
Ward 2.
Okay, thanks.
Been thinking about this since I first heard about it, but didn't think I could come tonight. So I hadn't made copies of a photo that I'd like to pass around. Across Salem Heights is Villa Candelaria development from a condo development from the 70s. They chose to honor the native white oaks with a little, what I call a pocket park, a grove of white oaks. They probably could have put in 4 more condos. They chose to make it a very livable, delightful place for all residents there to enjoy. I'd like to pass this for councilors to help you.
She'll help you. She's right there to help you.
Good. I would hope that if this project is approved, that there'd be a way that they could reduce the number of units and include this type of white oak grove as a private little pocket park as they have across the street. And in closing, a quote from a book called The Whisper of a Million Leaves. Suburbia is where the developer bulldozes out the trees, then names the streets after them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Very good. Okay, any questions for staff? Yeah, we will. I'm going to give you a chance to ask questions of staff if you want. And then we'll continue. Yes, Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to inquire about, we heard a lot about criteria number 2 from Mr. Ekus, and that no consideration was given to that, and I was wondering if staff could address that.
In your staff report is the planning administrator's decision. We addressed every criterion for the subdivision. It's addressed. The public works memo and the staff findings recognize that it's a collector, that the number of trips does not exceed 1,000 trips for a collector street, so a TIA was not warranted. That's the standard for the code.
What about the second criteria?
So we addressed all of the circulation and the connectivity through the site. We go through Chapter 803 to determine what connectivity standards are required, that they're meeting block length, they're building the streets the correct way, but our review is limited to generally the subject property without getting into a bigger issue. And maybe Tony would like to answer that question.
Good evening, councilors. Tony Martin, Assistant City Traffic Engineer.
Typically, we look at the volume and the classification for warranting a TIA. That section of code is really for us to look at. If there's a case where it didn't meet the criteria for a TIA, we can use that to get a TIA. When I look at this section of code, the second one, I don't believe it meets the criteria. There really isn't a documented safety problem. There's traffic. It has been traffic. You heard a lot of testimony that it's existing issues. The developer isn't really responsible for existing issues. There aren't a lot of, there's some information about crashes, but it's not above any kind of dangerous crash rate that we've seen anywhere else. There is traffic. Many of the people admitted to speeding on the road. Speeding happens. Everybody speeds a little bit. And it is narrow. It's a street that was brought into the city, probably from a county. It's 40 feet of right-of-way, probably 22, 23 feet of pavement. It's a challenging situation. So I don't believe it's a safety issue, so we didn't apply that one.
Thank you. If I
Yes,
could
go
follow
ahead.
up. Oh, since we have the assistant traffic engineer. There was a mention about an offset intersection. Can you address that? Is that true, and what's the plan there?
It is offset a little bit. I don't believe it'll be an issue because right turns have priority over left turns. That's the natural law, and so I don't think it'll be an operational or safety issue. I would prefer to line them up if I can, but given the layout and the topography and trying to protect trees, an offset intersection a little bit is okay.
Thank you. And do you have any opinion about this suggestion that we might place a blockade on, I think it was Doughton Street, temporarily until Salem Heights is brought to standard? Do you have an opinion about that?
I do.
Would you share it, please? I had a feeling you might. I didn't know what it would be, but I thought you might have an opinion.
I believe connectivity for vehicles and peds and bikes is important. I think it's a requirement of city code to provide connectivity. I think it's important for fire life safety because if someone gives an address of Doughton Street and they pull up Salem Heights and they're trying, like a fire truck or an emergency vehicle, and now they have to go around to come in from the other side, I think that could be a problem.
Tony, help me on this one then. On Pine Street now, we have, what is it, Cherries? Is it Cherries closed? I'm trying to think of the other, Maple.
Yeah, Pine and
Yeah,
Cherry.
I mean, I remember when those were open, and gosh, you had lots of connectivity onto a major collector on Pine Street, which I assume improved public safety on those streets. As you describe public safety, it seems to be working and has for 20, 25 years.
I believe that was more of a traffic calming to try to get.
Tell me what this discussion's about.
I wasn't here when that was done.
Okay.
So I really can't speak to it that much.
But we've seen this done in other parts of town where we had somewhat similar problems where people were moving rapidly through the Highland neighborhood onto Pine Street. I'm just curious because only because I've seen it done before. I just wondered. And it's permanent. It is done deal there.
Right.
This is talking about some sort of timed.
The challenge in my mind is that if that was done and you make it temporary,
yeah,
it will never open until Salem Heights is improved.
What would Salem Heights be categorized as now at 24 feet of width and then looking at the shoulder and only 40 feet of right-of-way available?
It's classified as a collector.
Yeah, but what would it be classified in its current condition?
Whatever the TSP designates it.
What is it? I mean, okay, what is it at 24 feet?
Well,
I mean, is that a lane? Is that
a standard travel lane that we would put on any road is 11 feet wide. That is the standard travel. So 2 travel lanes, 11 feet would be 22 feet.
So if we were building a street to the standards that Salem Heights is built at now, what would the designation be under it that it would be working with?
Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, Robert Chandler, Assistant Public Works Director.
the issue, as I understand the question, is the way the street looks is different than the way the street is classified.
The way the street has looked for 25 years.
At least, yes.
Yeah.
And the reason it is classified as a collector in the transportation system plan is because a collector, by definition, connects neighborhoods, and that's what Salem Heights does. The fact that it looks like a local street is a function of the nature of the street, the restrictions, and the other things that you've heard here. It looks like a local street, but it really functions, and in the 25 or 20 year of the transportation system, is designed to function as a collector. The best I can do, the answer.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else have questions? Yes, Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you. I have a question about the daily trip count, because we heard a lot of testimony and a lot of different numbers about the actual daily trips. What I'm finding in the record, at least, is 204 daily trips. That's what was assessed that would be on Salem Heights. Is that?
So I believe that came from the applicant's consultant, 204, after they've taken the 34 lots, applied the number of trips that we would expect, sent some of those to the north that will go to the north, and so there would be an additional 204 trips on Salem Heights during the entire day.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll take Councilor Hoy's similar vein in that a stop sign at proposed Doughton and Salem Heights, thoughts about that? Would that help at all provide traffic calming along Salem Heights, forcing people to stop midway through?
We have specific warrants for stop signs. We don't like to put unwarranted things in. Many times you put in something unwarranted, then people run them, especially when they're used to driving fast through an area. Hey.
No, I know. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the lady that's going 35 in a 25 zone, and then you give her a stop sign to run. It's going to be chaos out there.
So.
Well, thanks. I've seen, personally, I've seen that a stop sign added in my neighborhood, traffic calm D Street. And kind of the same vein, people were speeding, and it was the concern they would run it. They don't.
On D Street?
D Street in winter.
Okay.
That stop sign was put in there. It's been very effective for peds and bikes and all that. So, but anyways, I was just curious as to your thoughts.
Okay. Any others?
Yeah, one.
Oh, Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, Tony, I think this is for you. The idea of closing off Doughton Street, leaving the three local streets, Fulton, York, and Doughton going north. Are those streets capable of handling?
They're local streets. Local streets can a local street's 30 feet wide. If it was built to the standard with parking on both sides, leaves about 16 feet if cars are parked. I would think it could easily handle that.
Okay. So your only concern really is the connectivity?
That's the biggest issue for me.
Thanks.
Councilor Hoy.
Thank you. Is there anything in our code that would preclude us from putting in that temporary barrier?
So the Chapter 803 has a requirement for the connectivity. The applicant would need to apply for a Class 2 adjustment as part of this application. So then we would have to provide notice for that and go through that process. So they don't have the adequate applications at this point for that to be approved. That was something that was discussed prior to the planning administrator's decision. The applicant chose not to apply for the Class 2 adjustment. Staff wasn't supportive of blocking connectivity, especially with not providing adequate notice to those people to the north that would get more traffic.
I just need to add also that as a matter of policy, and the council adopted a transportation system plan, connectivity is one of the policies, and we contend with that periodically of this. So it is a policy as well in the TSP.
Councilor Nanki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we have any deferrals for sidewalk from previous developments in that area, or because there really is nothing, we didn't make anybody put any money in?
There's none that I'm aware of. I mean, most people testified that their house was built in the 50s and 60s, probably when they were in the county or something like that. And so I'm not aware of any deferrals.
And what was the kind of the timing on the build of the condo units across the street?
I thought it was 70s, 73.
Okay. Still way back. Yeah, it looks
Okay.
a lot like 12th Street did before we
Yeah.
got sidewalks, and that's a major arterial.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. I move to close the hearing and keep the record open as far. Oh, God, I'm sorry. We got to let the, I apologize. We did. Are you guys done asking questions of staff? Yeah. Yeah, okay. 7 minutes, Mark, I'm sorry.
I just told we have 5.
Okay.
Hopefully,
The
I'd
attorney
love
will
7.
give you 7.
I'll take 7.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a couple of people that want to speak. Mike Ard from Art Engineering is going to talk about safety of the road, and then I'm going to come back with a couple items, and then hopefully that'll leave time for Mr. Tross.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Mike Ard with Art Engineering. I'm a professional transportation engineer practicing for over 20 years. I prepared a brief, almost a traffic study. I hesitate to call it that because a traffic study wasn't required for this project, but I did prepare an analysis that focused primarily on whether staff made an appropriate decision in not requiring a traffic impact study. I looked at the trip generation and distribution for this development. I looked at the code standards in terms of traffic volumes that need to be added to streets and came to the same conclusion that staff did, that the volumes would be below those thresholds. I also went a little bit further in looking at the crash history for Salem Heights Avenue and found that there were 15 crashes in the last 5 years of most recent data that's available through the state. 10 of those crashes were at Liberty Road. The crash rate there was actually not exceptionally high based on those 10 crashes. The other crashes occurred 1 or 2 at miscellaneous intersections, only 2 of which actually occurred at locations on Salem Heights Avenue west of Liberty Road. So there were 2 documented crashes in 5 years. Neither of those had any kind of injury associated with them. So in terms of documented safety history, there really isn't one on Salem Heights Avenue. I do want to talk a little bit about increased hazard, which is something that has come up during the public testimony time and again. And in particular, I want to focus on the first testimony that I heard, which is that the addition of sidewalk on the north side of Salem Heights Avenue along this property frontage is not going to be helpful for anybody and that conditions are going to get worse. I strongly disagree with that. The fact is there are people walking on Salem Heights Avenue right now. Those people will be afforded a safe corridor along that property frontage, and while it's limited, it will connect to Doughton, and Doughton will connect to the north. If I was walking or riding a bicycle from a location further into the neighborhood, I would walk along that new sidewalk. I would turn in through this new neighborhood and walk along a local street, avoiding Salem Heights Avenue. The new connectivity provided by this development will improve safety in the site vicinity, and that goes to a second thing, which is that if this development doesn't worsen the conditions in terms of bicycles and pedestrians in the site vicinity, then you really don't have the ability to require an off-site improvement that would mitigate what isn't an impact. And that's the position that you find yourself in here. There wasn't a traffic study required. The impacts of this development on traffic volumes are going to be relatively negligible in terms of the volumes that go to the west of the site. And to the east of the site, we actually allow fewer pedestrians and bicycles to traverse those areas. So, in conclusion, safety is promoted by this development in terms of bicycles and pedestrians. And I think that connectivity is something that is lost on people who are arguing against the development. But overall, the staff did not err in finding that a traffic study was not needed, and their conclusions were valid. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. A couple of quick comments. First, I want to address what Mr. Reitman spoke about early on when he talked about requiring the developer in this case to put in a bicycle and sidewalk along the entire length of Salem Heights. And while that sounds nice in theory, it would violate the needed housing statute, ORS 197-307, and it's not roughly proportionate to the impacts of this proposed subdivision. And that would also violate Kuntz v. St. Johns River. Second, I'm going to address what I'm going to call the ECUS alternative. for lack of a better word. And it's an alternative that I believe that the developer, Mr. Kay in this instance, had recommended, and that staff had actually pushed back on. And I think rightly so, because the concept is connectivity. You heard that from Mr. Martin. And if the city wants to essentially tell the applicant that they'd like him to file for a Class 2 adjustment, the applicant would do so only under the proviso that it's going to be approved. It makes no sense to force Mr. K to have to go through another land use application only to not be supported by staff, have to appeal it to the Planning Commission, have to be called up here or appealed back here months down the road. That's not appropriate either. If we can, in the open record period, if we can come to a meeting of the minds and agreement, then that works. Otherwise, that option doesn't work. At this time, I'd like to turn over the rest of my time to Mr. Tross.
Thank you.
Thank you once again, Jeff Tross. And real quickly, a couple of things. First, on April 30th, Tom Kay and I met with city staff to discuss just this idea of closing off Dalton to motor vehicles. It would remain open for pedestrians and bicycles. We understand why it was not accepted by staff at that time, and since then it's just been out there. At this time, we have no particular position toward that. I think you've heard enough from the neighborhood to understand. I know you've heard enough from the neighborhood to understand what they want. It's between the neighborhood and the city council, and we take no further position. However, what's important to understand is that if the street is closed off and there's no vehicle traffic onto Salem Heights, then there's no impact on Salem Heights from motor vehicle, and there's no justification for the developer to improve the frontage as would normally be the case. So we would suggest that the frontage improvement be eliminated if the street is closed off. And that's important not only because there's no impact, because the neighborhood also wants you to consider changing the street classification from collector to local. What standard would he improve it to at this time? And finally, as Mr. Shipman just mentioned, if that decision is made, it should not require the applicant to go through another land use procedure. That's absurd. So whatever decision is made is fine, keeping in mind that there are implications, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? All right, thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, just go ahead and close it.
Go ahead and make your motion.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yo.
So we'll keep the written record open.
Yeah, I got a motion to kind of take us through.
The applicant will have a chance to do a written rebuttal for that
Yeah.
additional evidence as well, correct?
Yep. Okay. I move to close the hearing and keep the record open as follows. 1, until July 29th at 5 p.m. for new evidence from all parties. 2, until August 5th at 5 p.m. for rebuttal with no new evidence from all parties. And 3, until August 12th at 5 p.m. for applicant's final written argument.
Second.
Second by Hoy. Yes.
Ex parte rules apply?
Absolutely.
Just to throw that out there. A lot of people don't relate to that.
Right.
Don't open the emails.
It might be helpful to explain what Councilor Nanke's referring to there.
Talk to your city attorney if you have a...
I understand it. I want the public to understand it.
So under Oregon land use law, ex parte contacts are disfavored. So that means contacts from members of the public or the applicant with the decision makers. That's you. So during this period, when the record's open, please avoid talking about the application with members of the public. You're welcome to talk to staff. If you get any communications, please don't open them if possible. And if you do open them, send them to me or Lisa.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Okay. We'll do our next public hearing. Let's just go ahead.
The City Council will now conduct a public hearing regarding consideration of adopting a resolution number 2019-26, the formation of the Aspen Grove Reimbursement District. Individuals testifying must provide their name and address or ward. Individuals are limited to 3 minutes of testimony.
All righty. Have we got anyone signed up? Yeah, go ahead. Did you read it? Yeah, okay, you can start your presentation.
There we go. There we go.
Everyone's waiting for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Bennett and City Councilors. My name is Glenn Davis. I'm the Chief Development Engineer with the City Public Works Department. I'm going to open tonight's public hearing with a very brief introduction about reimbursement districts. So reimbursement districts apply when an area lacks critical infrastructure, and then developers construct improvements that serve a larger area. The reimbursement district process provides a mechanism for those who benefit from the new infrastructure to pay their fair share at the time of development when they benefit from the improvements. The process for improvement districts for reimbursement districts starts with a proposed development in an area that lacks that infrastructure. Then the developer constructs the improvements. The developer applies for the reimbursement district, and once formed, the city collects reimbursement fees and reimburses them to the developer. And we are now in the formation of the reimbursement district process, as you can see on the map. So here on the screen is a vicinity map. Highlighted in blue is the site of the development that's the subject of the reimbursement district. It was developed quite some time ago. The development site is located along Wallace Road between Harriet and Linda Lane, and you see Linwood Elementary is there to the northwest. So here the map is zoomed closer. On the screen you can see the future Marine Drive extension toward the east, and then beyond that to the east is an existing trunk sewer main that is east of Marine Drive. The developer built a sewer main as shown in yellow as a condition of approval for that Aspen Road Apartments that's outlined in blue. So the sewer main has the potential to serve a number of properties in the area. Highlighted on the screen is the maximum possible area that could be benefited from that sewer main construction. However, a number of properties were connected to that main prior to formation of the district. So if you remove those properties that have been connected, what's left over is the district boundary, which you see on the screen. And the boundary continues to the east on this page because the entire tax lot is included in the district. So the two properties on the east side of the trunk sewer continue to the east. But that is the functional area of the district. So the developer submitted a total cost of $203,000 and change, and you can see in the bottom of the screen there, the costs eligible for reimbursement are limited to only less than $88,000. And I've included a breakdown of the basic categories of costs on the screen. The regulations of the city and policies limit what is eligible. And you can see primarily the issues of easement acquisition and attorney's fees are the primary issues that were deemed ineligible based on policy. So I won't go into great detail about how the fees are calculated. I will say that the linear footage is generally the preferred method of how these are normally funded. In this particular case, it's rather unusual in its configuration, so we used a linear footage area calculation, as you see toward the north, and then those were properties that actually had a direct benefit from the piping on the properties, and then the area in the south was a square footage area that those didn't have any linear footage to measure. So the staff report explains how those costs are proportioned, and on the screen shows the actual reimbursement fees allotted to each parcel. The total is on the bottom of the screen. You see it's the $87,000 plus was the eligible cost. But not all of those are eligible because the Aspen Grove benefited from the sewer main, so a portion of that eligible cost is subtracted here at 41%. So the total maximum reimbursement to the developer is just under $52,000, 59% of the eligible cost. So that concludes my presentation. Here on the screen is the tax parcels that show the reimbursement district. Now I'm here for any questions.
Well, we have 3 members of the public. Don Clark.
Could you leave this drawing up here? Yeah, leave it up, please.
Councilman, Mayor, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Could you get close to the
Oh, I'm
mic?
sorry, excuse me.
No, that's okay.
Council members, Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to address you. My name is Donald Clark. My wife and I raised 4 lovely children in that area that we're talking about right now, and we've really enjoyed it. And we've had quite a bit of trouble with the contractor at this site where we've been building. We are in the county. We're not in the city. And we had a big battle several years ago about jurisdiction over that sewer line. And the city lost big time, and so did Hans. We're in the county, and you have no jurisdiction, I don't feel, over a county. We're 501. The sewer line runs down. He does not enhance us at all. We have access to the sewer, so we're asking that we be eliminated from his enhancement. I assume that this enhancement is just strictly for the sewer.
Okay.
And we're in the county where we're saying that the city has no jurisdiction over us. There is no enhancement to our property for that because we have access to the sewer. Where they drop into the sewer main line, that's on our property. So we can get into the sewer anytime we want. If we were ever to develop that, we'll put it in our own line. We won't worry about his. So we don't need his enhancement.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Vince Lanza.
Okay. Mayor, City Council, thank you. My name is Vincent Lanza. I live at 1934 Wallace Road. I am number 601 on that list. Now, he says that he improved my property by putting in a sewer. Where my sewer comes out of my house, it's 2.5 feet lower than where his comes in. So I have to put in a sump pump and pump my sewerage up there. I had A&D Septic come in and check it out. They gave me $27,000 estimate to put that in. Now, where did he improve my property? He did nothing. Nothing for me whatsoever. We are county also. We are not city. So we shouldn't be a part of his stuff. Excuse me. He's made me mad. The man has really been a problem for the last 5 years. I notice he's not here. Why? Why ain't he here? Because he does not want to face us, period. Don, he's been a very good friend of mine. I trust him. I appreciate him as a neighbor. Hans has been a horrible neighbor, horrible. He's put up floodlights to put in right into my bedroom off of his property. I've called the city, tried to complain about him, got nothing out of it. I understand that he is a part of the city and he does come down here and spend a lot of time and money investing around. But what he's doing is wrong. He's treating people wrong and should not be allowed to benefit from our hardship. The man, I don't trust him, and I have an out. By going to the south, when that property's developed, I can easily tie in there. I can also tie in down at Don's. There's other ways for me to go. I don't need him whatsoever. And what he did for me was absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Which lot are you? What's your
601.
Lot? 601, okay. All righty.
See, he's mad because I bought it out from under him. He went in at a low ball price. I came in at a profit. They took mine. Also, they said that there was 3 places that were already tied into it. No, the property right next to mine, to the north, is the only one that tied in. And he charged the old man who owned part of his property for it. So he already got paid for that part. But the neighbors up in front of us, 700 and 603, he gives them an easement down our driveway. They can put in the line, but it's almost 400 feet for them to put in that line. This is how he did for us? I don't think so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lanza. Any questions? Scott Bassett?
Good Mayor and council members. My name is Scott Bassett. I live in Ward 4, but my wife and I own property that's 401 on the map. And we are opposed to the reimbursement district. The yellow line is what we're talking about, the cost to build that. The white line that's over on the right side that says existing trunk line actually goes through my property, it goes through Don and Mary Clark's property. We're already at the sewer line. And so when the staff got this application, they start looking around, how can it be, the cost be allocated? And what happens is that this was done April of 2014. So it's over 5 years ago that this was done. The city code says you do a reimbursement district application, you submit a complete application within 180 days, within 6 months. The applicant submitted for this reimbursement district, and it has 2 phases, one that goes east-west, one that goes north-south. He completed the east-west one first. The city has had this in their possession for over 4 years. The standards in your code say you act on it, the deadline is 180 days. So you're going to hear from staff, oh, well, this isn't under land use laws, so the 30 days to submit a complete application that you're used to in land use laws don't apply. Well, the city council is the sole decider of this issue. There's no state law that's like the land use laws. And so if you want to send a message to developers, submit your application, make it complete within your 180 days, but don't have the city chasing around for 4 years to try to get documentation that the developer never provided. So I gave you a handout, and I would like to highlight on the front page that there are 3 significant problems with the application. The first is the missed deadline. The second is the developer still hasn't submitted a receipt for the construction of the east-west line. So in the last minute that I have here, unless I get a question or two, I want to highlight that the table is from the staff report. The developer claimed $46,000 for construction, and the staff recommend $35,000 because they estimate that's how much it should have cost. In effect, the developer has provided no receipts and was in a legal dispute with the contractor, may not have ever paid the contractor, and yet the city, you would here be authorizing the developer to get $35,000 towards costs he may have never paid. So that's one issue. But the Salem Revised Code 350C states no reimbursement shall be allowed for any costs which cannot be clearly documented. He hasn't submitted a receipt for it, shouldn't be documented. Engineer recommend that it be on a square foot basis, and the management overruled him and said it should be on a frontage. So here.
Time's up, Scott.
Okay, great.
Okay. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Bassett, for coming down. Is your property in the city or the county?
It's in the city.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Bassett? Okay. Question for staff? How about this deadline issue? What's your thoughts on that?
Mr. Bass and I had discussed it briefly. We had a lengthy discussion at the staff level that the code says that you need to have an application submitted within 180 days of it being accepted, and that was paid and an application was received. It just wasn't complete.
Yeah.
And then because we don't have a timely completeness process in our code, that stretched on for years, and we've had countless requests for the information, and at some point we were finally able to get that over the course of many years. So that is essentially a weakness in that particular code provision. It just doesn't have that completeness process, and that is something that we plan on changing here when we have the ability to do that.
You'll bring a recommendation to us to change that.
For the
Do we
future.
have other reimbursement districts where this has gone on, where it's covered many years? I was thinking about the Illahee one. It seemed like it's come up a couple of times over the years.
Some have gone on for almost a year, so it is sometimes slow, but this is
4 years?
by far the longest we've ever had.
How about this problem of county versus city?
So in the resolution, you only pay the fee if you benefit from the improvement. So if you don't connect to it, you don't pay.
Oh.
And if you to connect to it, you need to annex to connect.
Oh.
So those are really self-correcting.
Okay. Councilor Nanki?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to hit that one up. And then we had the one off, Charleston last year down at the end as we come out of the industrial district. Does this have an end date on it as well?
Yes, the code has a length of time. I get them all mixed in my head. There's so many different ones. Do you have that, Dan, in front of you?
Because one, if you don't hook up to it because you have access to something else, and two,
I believe
if
it's
the time
20
clock runs out, then the reimbursement district just goes away.
There is a time. Yeah, there is a time clock. I believe it's 20 years, but I don't remember.
That's
and again, if nobody connects, if you don't benefit from it, and some testimony was that they could connect directly to the trunk sewer.
Right.
I will clarify though that the trunk sewer has policies that you connect at manholes, and this is the only manhole in the area. And so to connect to it, you need to connect to the yellow pipe to meet our standards. So that's why those pipes that go along the white trunk sewer won't be able to connect directly to the sewer because of the policy of limiting direct connections because of inflow and infiltration. So they connect at manholes, which is the yellow, so that's why they're included in the district.
Councilor Hoy?
It is 20 years.
excellent. Thanks.
So it's a 20-year life to the reimbursement district. Okay. Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question that Mr. Bassett brought up about the undocumented expenses, do you have documentation for those expenses or not?
What I can tell you is we have our construction engineer has been doing this for 24 years, and this was his recommendation, and that memo is in the file. He has recommended that it does meet the criteria. So that's what I can tell you. He's not here tonight, unfortunately.
So I'm not sure I heard an answer to my question.
The documentation that was accepted was the engineer's estimate for the cost, not receipts, and that is not an unusual policy.
Thank you.
So the reimbursement is based on a collection of receipts, and this is just a not to exceed $85,000. Is that the idea of it, or am I misunderstanding? I'm not sure I get where we are.
The developer gave us a lot of costs that we would review that they wanted to be reimbursed for in the amount of over $200,000, and 88,000 of those were accepted as eligible. The other ones were removed.
So there's receipts for $88,000. Is that how it works, or I mean, has he had to prove cost, or how does that work?
For the most part, there's receipts. One of the complications of this process is in construction in the private sector. Often, the construction contracts are not specific to what was built. Here's my project as a whole. I'm going to pay you as a contractor this much money. And so deciphering how much of that was allocated to each thing is often not clear. And that's what Mr. Whitehurst's expertise is as he goes through these. And so it can be quite complex.
In short, the receipts for the contractors are not itemized to the degree necessary to be clear, to have the exact numbers that we should have. So we might have receipts that the total is paid, but it's not itemized entirely that we would like to have for establishing the reimbursement district.
Okay. Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is it unusual for an applicant for a reimbursement district to not appear before City Council when they're making this request?
They receive notice that they don't have to appear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilor Lewis?
Yeah, just want to make sure I understand correctly. None of these fees will have to be paid unless the property goes to development.
Or connects to the sewer. If it's an existing structure and they connect to the sewer, then they would pay then. If it's in a vacant property, then at development and connection.
Well, let's say, for example, the tax lot 601 may be just a homestead forever. It's got obviously a well or something that provides sewer and water, so they may never have to pay this fee. On the other hand, if I understand correctly, if any of these property owners do want to develop, then they are going to have to connect to this sewer line.
Most likely, yes. I mean, there are development patterns could change, but almost certainly, yes, they would have to connect to this main.
Okay. Any further questions? All right, Counselor, I'm going to close the public hearing. Counselor Lewis,
Move staff recommendation.
second by Nenke. Discussion?
I'm not comfortable with this one. I'm going to be a no.
Kaiser?
Yeah, I agree with Councilor Hoy. This is too gray, I think, to make a decision, at least tonight. There's not documented expenses, which it sounds like perhaps that's not practice, which is making me pretty uncomfortable with this being a policy of the city to allow that. The applicant taking 5 years to get an application together seems suspect. I know perhaps our ordinance doesn't, or whatever our code allows for that to happen, but it doesn't seem like a good faith effort on the part of the applicant. It seems like he kind of abandoned it and then realized he wanted to do it and then came back. So I'm going to be a no on this.
Do you have any interest in continuing this hearing to get answers to some of these questions, or do you want to just vote up or down on it? Because we really want these off the sewer, Counselor. I mean, we want these guys doing septic out there instead of using a sewer.
Yeah.
And it may foreclose possible development out there as well.
I'm still on the phone.
Okay, do you want to talk? We're glad that we were going to check, see if you were there.
You know, if there's more information that's out there, I don't mind holding off. I'm not sure what that
Counselor
would
Kaiser.
be.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we're waiting on. But
These districts are unusual, but they do, in my opinion, promote appropriate development. And when you have folks that are willing to put up the money to put in infrastructure, lines, sewer lines, whatever, and there is a benefit potential for those who would want to develop, then I think a reimbursement district is appropriate. And I see that in this case here. Now,
this
if
is
we're going to talk
voluntary.
about
You don't have to sign up for this because you don't have to develop your property, is what you're saying.
if you don't want to develop your property, you don't have to pay anything.
And I'm sure none of these guys want to develop their property who are objecting.
I'm
Counselor
not that
Kaiser.
sure.
Thanks. Even if, like, Mr. Lanza, who gave testimony, wanted to develop his property, it doesn't mean that he couldn't connect to the sewer or even construct his own, is my understanding. All this is doing is paying the developer for improvements made that he can't really show that how much he spent on it, and that he spent 5 years putting together an application to present to the city. So I don't think it's precluding any kind of development or people moving off the septic. I think it's the process of this has been very mushy and not clear, and I don't think there's good standards for this. I'm wading through the staff report trying to find criteria, which seems to be missing, and that might be a problem with our code, but it just doesn't feel right to me.
Okay. Counselor Nanke?
We required an overbuild on the sewer system, correct? Meaning he had to build that yellow line to be able to accommodate additional tie-ins.
The overbuild, if you want to call it, was the extension of the yellow to the south line of the property. He would have normally, to serve his development, would have served the linear footage area in the north and would have ended it at his property. So the extension to the south was like additional.
All right, so that only really affects 700, 603, 601 if we look at it that way.
If you chose to look at it that way.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, this may be one of those votes where developers will discover it's really wise to show up to answer questions on a reimbursement district. What a mistake that was. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. Got one yes? Okay. Motion fails.
What about Councilor Leung?
Councilor Leung, do you want to vote? I've just been counting you as a yes when I don't hear from you, so let's hear what you think.
Yes.
Okay.
There's a yes. No witness.
Okay. Motion fails. Okay. Special orders of business, except first. First one up is 3.2A. I'm going to move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Second by Hoy. The reason I called this up is it had a couple of projects I'd asked staff to kind of highlight for us. This one, I'm trying to remember, just real quickly get a copy of it here. Glenn Davis is going to help us out a little bit on this one.
He looks like he's eating
Because you're having a good night, Glenn. But I'm really interested in just a discussion of a couple of the projects that deal with infrastructure. I think you've been told which ones I was interested in because I can't remember. So I'm getting old.
Water, wastewater.
Water,
wastewater.
Yeah.
So you just want me to speak to the projects?
Yeah. Why don't you tell us what's going on here?
So we had a 2-year process of adopting a new systems development charge methodology, and part of that is to make a list of projects that are eligible for SDC payment. And I like to. It's called in the business. It's called a 309 list based on the suffix in the ORS. So it makes you sound smart to say 309 list.
And it's a great list. And the ones that I had to get to them here real quick, was to have you just talk briefly about the 2 Guerin Island wells. Those are both listed here at about $7 million, and I'm really interested in those because we've been talking about them as adding capacity and quantity to our water system, as well as offering some potential dilution if we have problems with the water system. What's going on with those?
Well, so this particular one before you was a minor change to what was already existing. So those were already in the old list.
Yeah.
And those are I'm not expert in all the details of the water system, but those are capacity requirements to give us more capacity to serve the city as a whole. And I'm hoping that Dr.
Brian
Chan will-
Martin, why don't you come on down, Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah, those 2 wells that we're working on out there, they actually do add capacity. So we can get another 10 to 20 million gallons of water out of those wells. So that's actually adding capacity to the system.
What's the timeline on those?
Those are 2022. So the
Very
ozone
good.
is 2021, but the wells are 2022.
And what will that do then to our general ability to meet water needs if we have any kind of crisis in the river?
Yes, so during peak months, the demand is about 40 to 50 MGD. So getting 10 to 20 million out of those wells would not allow us to meet peak, but it would help supplement the system. And if we had to curtail water because of some catastrophic incident, we could at least get 10 to 20 MGD out of them.
It also adds some diversity to our water sources, right? Am I getting this
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. And,
Okay.
Even with anything that can happen out there, having the ability to take groundwater and add it with our surface water just gives us more resiliency.
Yeah, I think that was, as I recall, that was one of the concerns last year, was that we have these kinds of more diversity to our water system, particularly when we're relying on a surface water system. So I just wanted to highlight this. I thought this was an important action to be taking, and one that we had promised and one that we're delivering on.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
And I will add that the value of the wells, which are on Guerin Island, is when we have, typically we draw the water from the surface of North Santiam River. This allows us to draw water from the wells, which is helpful when there's turbidity. You have less turbidity with the well water being pulled forward.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passes. 3.3A, I move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Second by Hoy. Bechtel and Lacey, do you guys, one of you want to come on up? I just want you to just kind of give us a brief description of this and what you're doing as it relates to water quality particularly. This seemed like a new program aimed at getting a handle ahead of time quickly on algae blooms and things like that. Could you give us a feeling on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Lacey Gorse-Priest, and I'm the drinking water quality supervisor for Public Works. So the intergovernmental agreement that's before you is with the U.S. Geological Survey, and essentially it's a coordinated project where we would construct or bring up to standards a water quality monitoring site called Niagara, which is below Big Cliff Dam, to house a data sonde which would collect water quality parameters that would give us real-time data to allow us to make better operational decision making at the Guerin Island Water Treatment Facility based on what we would be seeing from that data. Additionally, the city has purchased a vertical profiling system to be housed at the log boom at Detroit Reservoir. And the USGS would be doing the operation and maintenance of both sites for us for the next 2 years, doing all the operations and calibrations and such. But City of Salem would be retaining that data, which is real-time data, which allows us again to have a great understanding of those dynamic changes that are happening in the watershed, to catch things such as the development of an algal bloom or any other sort of impact to water quality, a spill, or any other event.
Great. Well, I just wanted to highlight this. I'm just really pleased with what Public Works is doing around this water quality set of issues. And this one, I think, is going to be one of those early warning systems and really give us the kind of data we need to be absolutely as responsive as quickly as we can if we see changes in water quality or events occur up really above Niagara, but all the way up above the dam. I think that's just really good. I was really pleased to see these show up. It shows, I think, the progress we're making in coming to grips with some of the issues we faced last year. So thank you very much. Councilor Nanke.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. But most of the other systems are in place. This is just to add Niagara into that previous.
Yes, so this is going to
System.
incorporate a new sonde that will capture the same water quality parameters that we capture when we're physically up on the lake. So it'll have a sensor on it that'll give us total bacteria population estimates, as well as
Yeah, there's some really cool acronyms in that list.
Yes, absolutely. And so it's an upgrade to that station, as well as the new profiler station. There's a similar project that's going on with the Eugene Water and Electric Board on the Mackenzie with USGS. So at the end of the 2-year project, they'll take that data and really try to get a better understanding of what's the causation of these harmful algal blooms in these cascade reservoirs, and how we can better prepare for those as water providers.
And the important piece of that is, you know, we can measure it up above, but Big Cliff is a mixing zone, and we don't know what comes out of it right now, and so we're kind of guessing.
Yeah, and Niagara's on the run toward our island, so it gives us something really on the move. I think that's really helpful as well. Very
Thanks.
good. Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passes. Councilor Leung, you pulled 3.3B. Do you have a motion?
This is Jackie. I make a motion to, what am I supposed to be saying in this particular?
You can move the staff recommendation. You can move, reject the staff recommendation. I don't know. You pulled it. I wasn't sure what you wanted to do exactly. This was on the consent calendar.
Right. So what I wanted to pull it to have it just pull it because I have some concerns about it.
Okay. Do I move staff recommendation?
I move staff recommendation.
Second.
Second by Lewis. Okay, go ahead, Counselor.
Okay, so my major concerns that I have with this particular issue, I mean, we've seen all the notices that have been sent out, all the written testimony and that were sent in, and also the emails that we've been receiving. And my concern is whether my concern has to do with ensuring that we are ensuring that the space that we will be relocating to temporarily for the library is going to be a space that still meets the ordinance, the specific ordinance in terms of inclusion for all groups within our community.
Okay, very good. I am going to call on a member of the public who wasn't able to be here earlier and just let him testify so you can hear his thoughts, Daniel Rawlings. And Daniel, if you'd introduce yourself and kind of what capacity you're here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Bennett and council members. My name is Daniel Rawlings. I'm on your Human Rights Commission. I'm not here today as part of the commission, but I am here today as a proud and openly gay man, a resident of the Salem community, and a property owner and taxpayer. I'm aghast and offended by the city and the idea that they would have an anti-gay organization give rental money from the library in its temporary location, and by the process that this has occurred. Aside from the fact that the Salem Alliance organization is very anti-gay, it's a real big slap in the face for the council to pass a proclamation 1 month and then give upwards of $500,000 to an anti-organization the next month. It's extremely sad that city staff on a recording was heard saying, "You can weather the outcry from the gay community about this issue. I'm not a storm, and city staff is not weathermen." Even more offensive were city staff members who said that the gay community could just not go if they were so upset. This means that they are okay with marginalizing a part of the community, even if only temporarily. This is not the first time I've brought concerns forward to staff about the library's openness to the gay community, and putting a library in an unwelcoming facility only makes it worse. The relocation committee had more than one choice, that's heard on a recording talked about, but they still have the recommendation of this place that's not very accessible for the disabled community, has extremely limited parking in general, and is obviously not welcoming to all. I'd ask that you please table this recommendation and ask staff to keep looking for another location.
Thank you very much. Were there any questions for Mr. Rawlings? Okay. Evan, you had a...
Just a comment. I called a friend of mine this morning who's a former member of Salem Alliance Church, and he happens to be gay. He said he felt that the LGBTQ people in our community would not feel comfortable using this facility at its proposed location, and probably would not use the library. And I think the payment of $228,000 to $342,000, the optics are poor for the community. So although I cannot vote, I know the person I'm filling in for would vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to second what Evan said. I mean, I understand that the church can sort of do what they want in this regard, but I think the city should strive for something higher, and I think the city can look at other alternatives. And it doesn't feel like the council's being presented with, I mean, I understand it's gone through committees and come up to this level, but yeah, I'd like to see the council look at other locations.
Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. As a member of the library subcommittee that considered this, we have looked at a lot of properties, I can tell you, and we struggled with this issue. And I'm the one that suggested that we send it to the Human Rights Commission because I felt like we needed to have their input. There aren't alternatives available. We keep hearing, oh, Kmart. Well, yes, Kmart's empty, but Kmart's under contract. I encouraged numerous sites out in East Salem. None of them either weren't. Toys R Us isn't available. The book bin out there is not available. Sears was available, but yet oversized, and we were unable to subdivide it, so we couldn't afford it. There were properties all over the city that we looked at. Staff was very diligent. I don't want people to be left with the impression that This was just sort of a one-off, and we found this building and we took it. That is not the case. It was a several-month-long process. We scrutinized. We kept sending staff back to do more work, and I feel confident that they did a really thorough job. In fact, just since this recommendation came forward, I became aware of a potential another property, and I asked staff to look at it. And I heard today that it's a property owned by Willamette University that we thought might be a potential. Unfortunately, as I understand it, it's got severe asbestos issues. Over $1 million worth of cleanup would be required before we could occupy it. That's well beyond our budget. So the work has gone on until just right before this meeting, looking at potential alternatives. And I understand the concerns. I do. I mean, I do, and I don't want to minimize the concerns at all. And that's not what this is about in my mind at all. But as a city, I don't know how we can be scrutinizing every entity or business that we do business with. When we start to do that, it's a slippery slope, and where does it end? And again, I don't want to undermine or discount any of the concerns. I understand, but I have a strong commitment from staff to make our temporary library as welcoming as possible. They understand that this issue is out there, and they are going to work hard to try to overcome it, and I'm confident that they will do their best. So I'll be supporting the motion tonight.
Councilor Lewis?
Yeah, I was also am a member of the subcommittee, the library subcommittee, and I want to echo some of the comments by Councilor Hoy. I too believe that the staff did as good a job as they possibly could seeking out places. They took recommendations. I gave them a couple, and they looked at them. But I mostly want to draw your attention to the comments from the Human Rights Commission. We have seen a number of those posted on blogs, but the whole story has not been posted, and I'm going to read from the last paragraph, if I might. This is from the Human Rights Commission statement. In the event that the city must use this location, the Commission recommends that the City Council publicly proclaim the city's support and adhere to the purpose and intent of the City Human Rights Code, particularly as applied to the LGBTQ community, and urge all of the city's residents to support and encourage a city free of discrimination barriers. Further, the city should affirm that the city, particularly at the library, is open and welcoming to all members of the community, and that the city is committed to ensuring that the library will remain so during the relocation. The Commission and the LGBTQ Task Force is committed to working with the library to develop options to make this work. What is clear to me is that they, in the event that this is the only location, and I believe it is at this time, that they are committed to work with us, and I believe that what we should be doing is doing some kind of notarization, a plaque or something. I mean, geez, if the council members are entitled to have their names on a plaque on the east end of the Minto Island Bridge, then we certainly should be able to put our names on a statement like this and have it be clearly visible at the library. And I would hope that we would be willing to put our names on it. I know I would.
Councilor Nagel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, members of the committee as well. This is a tough one. And then you look down the road and it's like, do we need to now have a questionnaire for everyone who owns property? But that said, we have limited options. Essentially, the building is empty. We will be the ones in it. So there's really no reflection of who's the owner of this building. It still looks like the Capitol Press. So signage is probably appropriate then as well, which we should have, in front of the library when we turn it back on as well.
Okay. Any further? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, and then finally, I move staff recommendation on 3.3D.
Second.
Greg? Hoy, was that you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. This is one I've been looking for. It's creation of a resiliency task force. This is an issue I mentioned in the State of the City several months ago, and I've had the opportunity to meet with Chief Niblock and Greg Walsh to talk about this. They agreed that this is something we need to do to kind of get prepared for what we never want to have to deal with, I think is what makes it so challenging. But I think you heard some interesting comments from the 350 group. I know I talk to people regularly and hear interesting comments just on how come people don't have enough water when we have problems with water. So I'm very excited to have this move forward. Chief Niblock's here. Thank you, Chief, for spending your evening with us. We appreciate it. Greg, I don't even know if you're paid to spend this much time with us, but really appreciate you being here and asking you to talk about this a little bit.
So thank you, Mayor and Council. Mike Niblock, Fire Chief. We approached this based on some conversations we had and the Mayor's desire to form a resiliency task force for our community. And the word resiliency can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. And so we chose what we thought was an attainable goal. There's a lot of different things we could look at. There were some mentioned tonight. We have a lot of emergency plans that exist in the city that aren't very publicly known. So, you know, water issues, flooding issues. We have plans for flooding issues in the city. So we've already addressed some of those things. The biggest thing that we see for cities that have water advisories, for example, or floods or earthquakes, is when their citizenry are not prepared to take care of themselves for a period of time. And now they're saying a 2-week period, and quite frankly, that's probably too short, but that's a good place to start. And one of the things that we have been doing since our water advisory is we have we have a CERT program, which allows people 21 hours to come learn about how to be prepared for an emergency, some basic first aid, how to take care of their neighbors. It's a great program. We've trained over 3,000 people, but it's 21 hours of commitment. So it takes some time to get through the program. We have shortened that down to several hours, a mini CERT class, if you will, to get people interested. We've trained I think we've about 47 times in the last, since the water advisory have taught that class. About 50% of the people who take that class then sign up for CERT because they're so interested in learning more about it. So one of the things we thought was, how can we have the biggest impact with limited resources in the next couple of years? And what we want to do is get a task force together, talk about how we can push that education out to the community. Communities that are prepared are more resilient and they bounce back quicker. If you know that your family is taken care of, they have water, food, the basic necessities, and you're a city worker, you're more likely to come back to work and help the city recover. If we're spending all of our time, there's limited police officers, firefighters, and public works people any given day that are in the city to respond, we're going to be immediately overwhelmed in a big event. And so if people are prepared, they're better able to make it through that. And so what we want to do is talk with the task force about how we can better educate our community. And we have a pretty lofty goal. We would like to reach 50,000 people in the next 2 years. But the way we're going to do that is we're going to use the synergy of our partnerships. So we're going to ask the hospital, the school districts, some of the people we're going to ask to be on this group with us are in emergency management already. We're going to ask them to help us spread this message, and hopefully we can reach a large number of people and train people how to be more prepared. It can seem daunting when somebody says, hey, you need all these things, where do you start? Well, there's some simple tools we can put together. I also would add that we are purposely looking at city employees as well. We are having conversations as a leadership team about what are our expectations. We have them in the fire department, we have them in the police department, we may not have them in the human resources department or other departments. And so we're having those conversations. We're encouraging our employees, there's 1,300 of us, to be prepared with our families, and then we can better help the community that we serve. Any given day, there's upwards of 200,000 people in this community that rely on us, rely on the city to be efficient. And if they're prepared at home, it just makes it easier for us to recover. So that's the intent behind this. We've got a group of folks, and the mayor would appoint these to this task force, and we figure between 4 and 6 meetings probably to get recommendations back and then begin what we would do, the education of the community, and then report back maybe yearly to the council and say, this is how many we've trained and here's where we're at. And down the road, there could be additional things that are added. But when we chatted with the mayor, we just talked about so many different ideas that are out there. You could spend 100 meetings talking about what could you do, and we think this is something that will accomplish a very needed thing in the community. And then beyond that, maybe there's other things we can tackle.
Thank you, Chief. Greg, did you want to? I want to tell you that these guys have been just tremendously helpful in this and have really given us a manageable approach for this first year. I'm really hopeful that what we'll have is information for you by your strategic planning sessions, so that as you want to build this and really to get to the manager some portion of it, if there is some sort of discussion that involves funding, which we'll try to avoid, but it's mainly to get to you some ideas for strategic planning to kind of keep this moving. What's surprising is how much really already has been done, and the number of plans that are in place, that if you really wanted to find them and you could get a hold of Greg and Greg could give them to you, you'd be really quite surprised how well we are prepared. But I just look back to last year and what happened, and it tells me it's the thing you least expect that shows the hole in your planning, and I'm hoping we can kind of start to get ahead of all that. So I hope you'll approve this. I think it's something that we need to take very seriously, along with other issues that we're addressing in our strategic and our budget planning. Greg?
Sorry, Mayor, if I may. I just wanted to let everyone know that we have a lot of support already for this. The Marion County Emergency Manager, who started about 2 weeks ago, Kathleen Silva, she was actually here at the beginning of the meeting. She unfortunately had to go home to let her dog out, but she was here to show her support for this whole thing to happen, and the ongoing engagement support, networking out into the counties, and then throughout some of the work I've been doing, I've established a rather large emergency management network in and around Salem, identifying more than 84 leaders in emergency management, risk, resilience, and safety throughout the community in different agencies, between insurance, banking institutions, state agencies, among others, schools, etc. And they've all heard this idea. They've already heard this, building education and sharing that, and sharing kind of the responsibility of that, as whether it's teaching the students in the schools or their employees at their different locations, so that we can overall have a more resilient and prepared community.
Thank you. Brad?
Sure, just saying that there are a lot of plans out there, and I read all of them when I was putting together Panasonic's business continuity plan to see what factors were across the board, and we met with SEDCOR as far as trying to get businesses involved in who has backhoes in the event we need to clear something out of the road. But we can skinny that down, because essentially it comes back to what can people do to actually let us do what we really need to. They need to be able to give our employees and emergency management employees time to start fixing things, because there's going to be a lot worse problems than them trying to get food or water. We're talking people at risk of death. And 3 meals from chaos. So people need, and that's what the CERT program is for as well, to at least shoot those people someplace and keep them off of these first responders. We're all our own first responders, but the city's first responders off of and able to do their jobs.
Really. Chief has a good record. He's been training every school kid in Salem to save your life when you hit the deck with a heart attack. I don't know how many thousand.
15,000 so far.
Yeah, if you are going to have a heart attack, have it in one of our schools. Is apparently the message.
Next to an 8th grader.
Talking to you, huh?
Yeah.
It may take a couple of those little kids to get the weight.
Yeah, it's a good point. Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passes. And we have information reports. Anything on information reports? Second readings. Ings.
Ordinance Bill 8-19, an ordinance declaring certain territory located at 1235 Hoffman Road Northeast annexed to the City of Salem, prescribing zoning and withdrawing the territory from the Marion County Fire District Number 1 in the East Salem Sewer and Drainage District. Counselor Lewis?
I get to go first. Aye.
Counselor Kaiser? Aye. Counselor Anderson absent. Counselor Nanki?
Aye.
Counselor Young?
See if she's there. Ask her if she's there, would you?
Councilor Young, second reading of ordinance bill.
Councilor Lewis? Aye.
There.
There we go.
Counselor Osick?
Aye.
Counselor Hoy?
Aye.
Counselor Cook absent. Mayor Bennett?
Aye. Motion passes. Okay.
Ordinance Bill 9-19, an ordinance declaring certain territory located at 4700 block of Lancaster Drive Northeast, annexed to the City of Salem, prescribing zoning and withdrawing the territory from the Marion County Fire District Number 1 and the East Salem Sewer and Drainage District. Counselor Kaiser?
Aye.
Counselor Anderson absent. Counselor Nanki?
Aye.
Counselor Young?
Aye.
Counselor Osick?
Aye.
Counselor Hoy?
Aye.
Counselor Cook absent. Counselor Lewis?
Back to the bottom of the totem pole. Aye.
Mayor Bennett?
Aye. Reading is okayed. Whatever the outcome of that is. Okay, I think that's it. Is anyone here from the public? No. So we are adjourned.